The Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia. For over 30 years, they have been the go-to destination for all your music merch needs. From working with today's hottest bands to create truly one-of-a-kind pieces, as well as boasting a truly massive online store, Rockabilia is your one-stop shop when it comes to band merch. Use our code BRUTALLY at checkout and take 10% off your total purchase order. Huge thanks to Rockabilia for their continued support, and now, on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Sam Hawkins of the Drinks with Johnny podcast. Also, you might know him if you've seen any of the celebrities that he makes toys of Sam the Hawk Toys. This is an epically long conversation, Rogan-esque, clocking in at over 3 hours, for a man who said he wasn't sure he wanted to do the show because there was nothing to talk about. I think we covered an awful lot of stuff. This is really kind of why I love doing podcasts with people who are in this side of things. It may be very inside baseball at times, but honestly, I think it's a testament to how I started the show, which is just fucking doing it. And then even someone like, Johnny from Avenged, who has more of a platform, but between him, Sam, and Brando, they had to figure it out. It wasn't just instant success. And for me to see someone at that level and kind of discuss the growing pains and just some of the things that we've experienced and gone through over this multi-year journey between all of us, I think it just kind of, I hate using this term because it sounds like, I'm some sort of gatekeeper authoritarian type person, but I think it just kind of gives the permission for someone maybe that listens to these things and goes, I'd really like to do this, or I wish I could do that. You fucking can. You really can. It's not that hard. Now, where it gets hard is when you start introducing, video versions of these things and so on and so forth. But honestly, this thing can be as easy or as complex as you want to make it. And, I'm going to make this real easy and not complex. Because this episode is so long, I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Sam. I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Well, I feel like you've had a pretty busy weekend. I mean, you got to go see Sting's last match.
Dude, oh my God, that was awesome. So, we're rolling now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We went to Sting's last match. Johnny Christ and I and our friend Brando, who we all do the podcast together, have become friends with Darby, as I'm sure you know Darby Allin, for those listening, as an AEW. And he's tag team partners with the Icon Sting. And we were already planning on going out there to see the match. And then a week before, I actually had tickets to go see Red Hot Chili Peppers and the night before, and then I was just gonna get no sleep and then just get up to take the first flight out in the morning to fly out there. And but then Darby told Johnny, hey, if you guys want to be a part of it, you guys can be a part of the escorting out. And the plan was that we were going to wear Sting masks and in Darby's brand Hoodlum. We were going to wear hoodies and just be anonymous Stings, walk down, and then we'd separate and Darby would ride a skateboard down, and that would be Darby's entrance. And I can talk about this now because it already aired, but and then after that, Sting's two sons come out as early Sting, Surfer Sting, and then Wolfpack Sting, and then he comes out as the current Sting. Well, during rehearsal, Sting goes, "This is too many Stings, so we're going to cut that part out." So literally at the rehearsal that we got there early for, we were told we weren't going to be used. So I kind of was like, in the back of my head, I was like, something's going to happen. This is going to get cut. So I had that. I didn't get too excited. I was very excited, but not too. But Johnny was like, I got to admit, I'm kind of bummed that we didn't get to. But the event itself was amazing. Backstage, because they weren't on camera, but all these legends were there. Like DDP was back there, and Lex Luger, and all. You what? You saw him?
I saw Luger. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, did they show him? Yeah. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. It was epic. So that was a really boring story. How are you doing, man?
Doing good. I listened to your latest episode today, and it felt fitting because why I keep
the one
wanting
with
to say
Steph?
Sarah, and I don't Steph. I keep wanting to say Sarah, and I knew that wasn't right. But yeah, the one with Steph, because she promotes her show as of when you were recording it, that she was going to be here in Grand Rapids, and I was like, oh shit, is she here like tonight? Like that's weird. And then I looked it up, and it was like a couple weeks ago, because she was here over Valentine's Day weekend.
Did you like that episode? Yeah. Comedian. She's super dirty, but I love it.
Well, have you, like, it's funny because I caught her somewhat recently on Kill Tony from like a few years ago. Like, she was on an episode. And so I was like, oh, it's that chick that I just saw like very recently. Because I just found, not that I've not known about that show, but like because of my job where I kind of can work and essentially watch my phone, a lot of times I'll put on the video versions of podcasts and just watch those because it'll kind of cycle through. And I've run out of a lot of stuff, so I had to start listening to newer things. And I was like, oh, there's like hundreds of Kill Tonys, and the premise with it being mostly people you won't know was kind of intriguing, because it's like if those people can be funny, or the comedians that are on can be funny with people who were not, it just kind of showcases how quick like people are with jokes. Some people are better at it than others. Like some guests are better at it than others. Some are really nice. Some are just like fucking ruthless. And man, that was the shits, man. You should just never do that again.
I think next week we're gonna have on Joel Jimenez, who used to be the drummer for Kill Tony, and he was talking about, I can't remember if it was on air or off, and he was just talking about how that was a really fun experience. And I think he did talk about how he became a part of that, and he started saying some stuff and got a little more camera time because he makes some good punchlines. But I think that show's awesome, and I'd love to see how many comedians came up as nobody, because he's been doing it so long, that are actually established comics now, because it's basically just an open mic is really what it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I've had a friend who was actually on it. They literally just pull names,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really clever name. However, and not necessarily calling anyone out by name necessarily, but I think those who listen to either of the shows that we are on and a part of probably know who I'm hinting at. But it's kind of funny because I feel like I'm starting to get to the point where, yes, I do think Kill Tony does a lot more good than quote unquote bad. But it also still feels like the idea of a battle of the bands, that you're using somebody else to create something for you that then, hey, I was on this thing, and it draws you to that. It kind of reminds me of what some of the earlier like Twitch things were, where it kind of became this like weird thing where people had a certain level platform. Yeah, well, that's who I was talking about.
Yeah, Bobby, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I'll call it out. Yeah, Bobby was just on the show.
Space Zebra.
So, yeah,
I know.
Space Zebra, yeah. Dude, it's genius, though, if you think about it. I mean, and I'll be lying to say, we did that recently. We had a couple in-between days, and Johnny was getting some publicist stuff sent to him. He's like, hey, why don't we just have... I mean, some of these bands aren't really... I mean, look... Not everyone we get is big, but like we thought, hey, we got a couple like mid-sized bands. Let's group them together to help the episode. And the episode did what always happens. It's the same. It didn't really do once either way. But he really liked doing those small ones, and I think we're gonna maybe do those more often to just kind of. He looks at it as helping out other bands. I think the thing that makes more sense, and like I remember when I was trying to maybe go the Twitch route with this on occasion, because it seemed like during the pandemic, especially and shortly after it seemed like that's where everyone was. But
and I'm sure, as you probably know, and it's funny that it feels like this is going to be a very name droppy episode, but it's kind of hard when Drinks with Johnny and you guys, like, I know, you, for those that don't know.
Well, I'm not a name, so I have to drop other people's. That's what,
well, right.
that's
but
what
I'm
I
saying,
have.
like, you basically are more, and had been up until recently, were more of like the producer, sending out the emails, doing all that stuff, getting the guests. And so it's funny because to me, when looking at what you guys are doing, it's like, if I were to try to do something like that, it's like, it's a little bit harder for me because it's like, it's already hard sometimes to get eyes on this. But I feel like you're saying, there's more of a direct benefit to with Drinks with Johnny, that more bands of that level are probably going to promote that they were on that show and be very excited about it and get more eyes and ears onto the thing. Whereas I feel like, if I were to do some of those same people, would just be like, it's just a show I did. And so for a lot of reasons, it's like, it's a little bit harder sometimes when you want the consistency of numbers and all that kind of stuff to try to branch out. Like, I have done so many bands first things, and even some that are kind of bigger now, where I'm like, man, it's I don't know what's happened in the last handful of years, but you haven't gotten better at this interview thing, and I just don't know that I want to talk to you anymore, because it's just like, if I wanted someone just to go, yep, yeah, it's been great.
It's
like
so
that
hard,
doesn't.
though. You
that
never
doesn't
know
do
until
good
you
for
get
this.
them on there. Yeah,
I know.
Well, I always talk.
I know.
I'm going to talk over you so many times, so just interrupt me, just so you know. That's what,
That's
even
fine.
with Drinks with Johnny, I tell John, I was like, dude, I fucking feel like I overtalk that. And he goes, welcome to podcasting, because it's really an art. And hats off to you, man, because my job as producer in the beginning was to be the good friend who tells Johnny, like, hey, you might want to stop here. This, because I'm listening as an objector. And I'm sure sometimes I'm over analyzing his stuff, and I've learned to kind of bite my tongue, like, just let that go. That's just normal conversation, But like, for example, we just had Chris I can never remember his last name, but
Van
he's
Vliet.
a wrestling. Yeah. We had him on, and when I was listening to it, John got really excited. And the cool thing about the show is it's just conversational. So I need to like get out of my head. And I didn't even mention this to him. But a few times I could tell Chris, as an interviewer, would do what you do, where he asks a question, and what he really wants is you to ask that question back. So he asked John, he goes, what was your first out, or what was your first concert, or something like that. But John would just went off into this thing telling about it. And then he goes, my first concert was, and it's like, see, he wanted you to ask. So it's all these things that you don't really learn until you do it. And John's way better now, like 200 episodes in. In the beginning, we call it the cringe years. But how long have you been doing this? You've been doing this forever. Before us.
I think this will be the 7th year, maybe.
Man, do you know how many
7 years.
episodes you have?
I have, actually, I can tell you right now because I just wrote it down prepping for the one I did earlier today. With the one I did earlier today, this will be episode 444.
Holy shit, dude. Hats off to you, dude. That's awesome, because it's a fucking commitment. There's times where I'm like, dude,
it's a grind.
I don't know if I want to keep doing this. You and I always text about this. Like,
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's honestly, I appreciate your friendship on this, because there's only you and shout out to our friend Dewey, who kind of is the reason why we connected from the Pure Pleasure podcast. Like, you guys are like the only ones that can really text outside of my podcast about issues.
But I think like, and then I'm sure this is something you and Dewey, I know Dewey and I have had this conversation, and I'm fairly certain you and I have probably in passing have had this conversation, but there seems to be this thing where some people want to make it a competition, and it's like, okay, I think we can all agree that there's like little to no money to be made. So at the end of the day, being jealous or thinking that if I help you, it's going to take something away from me, that's horseshit. Like, so why not just be like in it to be like, we're all in this together. It's a weird, fun thing. And I mean, and I guess this is kind of like a fun thing that we can kind of segue into, but like, think about like some of the friendships that you've made because of this. And I realize I shouldn't call it this stupid thing, but it's like, in the reality of it, it's a stupid thing because I'm talking to people. Like, that's not, it's not a skill in my head. I'm trying to get better at when people say I'm good at talking, to be like, everyone can talk. It's not that hard. But I think it's through repetition, through listening to other people, listening to yourself, you find how to be better at it, a better communicator, I think is what it boils down to. But it's just so funny to see how like some people are so shitty and negative in this space and just want to, take but never give. And I think that was something that was big that Dewey always kind of imparted on, is his philosophy that in life you kind of need to do the give a penny, take a penny. But you need to do that in podcasting where you can't always take from the guest, you have to give. And by giving to the guest, it allows them to give back to you and you can take a little bit more. And it's kind of this ebb and flow thing, but it just takes a little while of getting comfortable with yourself and with, strangers essentially. But I still come back to the thing that it's fucking wild. Like the friends I've gotten through doing this or the people I've just gotten to talk to that still know me. And you're just like, that's crazy. And I think you probably get it a little bit more with probably even like with your toy making and stuff like that, like the people who are genuinely stoked on these toys that you made or action figures, I should say.
Good. Look at you're a pro. The transition. Yeah. So it's funny that you say that. So just last weekend, I did a story share, but I haven't posted. I'll post it later because I got his name wrong. We had Darby, back to the wrestling. His friend, one of his best friends and partner in his clothing line is this guy Nolan, who is Rake in Ghostmane. And long years ago, when I was kind of starting, he had pulled me aside. He's like, "Hey, man, if you ever get time, and no pressure, but if you could make one, that'd be cool." And I knew I was coming, so I just within like 24 hours, or 48 hours, flipped this toy for him. And when I did it, I spelled his name wrong. His last name is Nunez, and I put a Z instead of an S. And I got it printed up. It's like, shit. But I didn't have any time to go back and redo it. But I'm like, I'm going to bring it anyways. But when I gave it to him, he was just so like thankful. And just he kept bringing it up. And then I was like, give it back to me. I'm going to fix your name. Because I see him a lot. So it's not like a one-off time where I'm like, here, I'm probably not going to see you again. I said, let me fix it. But he didn't want to give it to me. He's like, I'm afraid you're never going to send it to me. I was like, no, I will. But it's people that feel the best of like, this is why I do it. I don't make them, to be honest, I think I sold one, and that was just because some guy DM'd me and asked me. I was like, fine, I'll sell you this one if you want it. And I sold it for a lot cheaper than I probably should, because I don't do it for that. I have a good paying job. This is my art. And in fact, I've been asked by people, I've told this story before, but do you know who Ryan Sickler is, the comedian? Mm-hmm. So he's the Honeydew podcast. He reached out to me and asked if I would, he's like, hey man, do you mind if we collab on he called it collab on a figure where, you make it and I'll promote the shit out of it. And I was like, yeah, sounds great. I'm a fan. Yeah, no problem. So I made it and I did it off his Night Pants tour on the logo and all this stuff. And he's like, that's awesome. Hey, can you change it to the Honeydew podcast instead? And I was just like, fuck, dude. Like, it became work then. And I took that as a lesson learned that if I am going to do it for people, and I made the change, it wasn't a big deal. But in the future, if people do it and I do it for them, if they ask, I'm going to clarify, I will do it, but you're going to get what you get, because this is my escape from work and the podcast and all this stuff. And as soon as I start doing custom orders for people like that, then it becomes work. But I'm all over the place because I am looking to do mass production for like bands and comedians that might not be able to do, like there's a brand called Super 7 that does these. You might have seen them, all the action figures, the rappers and the heavy metal guys and the punk rockers, but they're all big IPs like, Run DMC or Metallica or these ones that sell a ton. But the little guys, like punk bands sell a shit ton of merch. But they might not sell Metallica like, 10,000 units or whatever. And I want to find this super niche of being able to build action figures for bands. Like even when I sent it to Nolan, he sent it to Ghostmane and he's like, hey man, can he make more? And I was like, spoiler alert for you guys. But so I'm like, yeah, so I'm going to look at that and at least make one for him. But if not, I'm going to maybe look at a line and we could do these limited edition figures of maybe 100 to 500 rather than thousands and thousands. And they're more specialty stuff. They'll be a little more expensive, but we'll do things where the artist signs them and things like that to give them more value. Because when you do smaller production, obviously the costs go up rather than, man, this is a really boring podcast. What can I talk about that's actually fun?
Well, and I mean, to me though, like, and it's funny because like the dude I was talking to earlier today, Keith Wallen of Breaking Benjamin, he's got a
we just had
record coming up.
Yeah, we just recorded with him. Yeah.
Okay.
How was he?
Yep, we just talked to. He was great. He will be coming through at the end of the month, and I think we're gonna try to get together and link up in person. And I'm gonna bring in some donuts because I guess most of the band is doing keto, so they don't really drink and all that kind of stuff. So, because I was like, I was like, oh, you guys are coming through. Would love to link up in person because like that's half of the fun of doing this is meeting the person in real life. I was like, if you're interested, and so he was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, come out, we'll hang. And I was like, cool. I don't know if you drink or if not, that's fine. But if you do, then I would love to bring like some beers from around locally. And so you can get like a taste of our local area. Because I know when you're on tour, like you're kind of stuck like with a runner who, like that's been one of the, like my favorite things of befriending people who tour and getting to like literally pick them up and be like, all right, we're going to go take you out for dinner. What do you want? And then if they're like, oh, I don't know, like this place sounds cool. Okay, cool. We'll just take you somewhere where we like going. But it's not within like walking distance of the venue where someone's probably like, okay, I guess I'll just go to this pizza place or something. Like, trying to get people out and about and kind of show them the area. And same with like, drinking our food or whatever. So I was like, so when I heard that he was like, yeah, we're kind of all keto and we don't really drink because it keeps our voices better for the tour, I was like, do you like donuts? Because I think Kalamazoo's got like one of the better donut spots in at least around here. And so he's like, yeah. And I was like, cool. So
that's a cool, unique way of doing it too.
Yeah, well, and it's like I told him, I was like, dude, I have so many friends that tour and like they're hooking my wife and I up with tickets or something like that, and it just feels one-sided. Again, going back to the give a penny, take a penny thing, where it's like, well, let me give you something for the hookup you've given us. Like, you didn't have to do that. So I would like to, reciprocate the generosity and do something. And it's like, bands of that level don't need that. Like, they have, like I said, runners, they have people who are catering and all that kind of stuff that it's like, I'm sure, like, the $12 I'll spend on donuts is like whatever. It's like a drop in the bucket of everything they have, but it's more the thought that counts, and like it's something different than just being like, hey, I don't know, here you go. But hopefully it'll be a good show. I mean, I haven't seen Daughtry, I don't think ever, and I've seen Breaking Ben quite a bit. So,
is it a Breaking Benjamin show or is it Keith solo?
It's Breaking Ben. And then Daughtry, and then he's opening that tour on a couple of dates with his solo stuff. So, but yeah, he good dude. I enjoyed talking to him. He like revealed right at the end because we were talking, because the last question I think I asked him was like, what song are you excited for people to hear? Because by the time this ep comes out, the record will have been out. So like, what are you excited, for people to hear? And he was like, oh, blah, 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 and then revealed that he was like, yeah, like I did ayahuasca, and like it kind of, some of the songs are informed by that. I was like, well, okay, like, well, let's get into that for a minute. And so then, I was like, I really like the album Closer for was it For Dad or something like that, or For Father or something to that effect. Basically, it's about his dad passing away, but spoiler alerts, but I guess not, because this episode will come after that. But he was talking about how during his ayahuasca trip, he kept seeing shadows going in front of a light, but not like there was a light and it was flickering, but like bodies going in front of a stationary light. And one of them then stood in front of the light and kind of had like a golden aura, and he realized it was his dad. And so he started thinking about his dad being able to still have communication with him in some other parallel existence, and that his dad can see him and see, what he's doing and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, it's a really cool fucking story. And it's like, had I not mentioned that song being one of my favorites on the record, in addition to him saying something about doing ayahuasca, that I was like, cool, I just pulled this random story out of you, like right at the buzzer, essentially.
That's awesome.
But I thought that was really cool.
So hopefully I'll give you some gems for this one to pull. Do you ever have episodes, and while someone says like, it's interesting, but you don't have enough for the clip out, where it's like too long or whatever, and you're like, you know what I mean?
So
or like, how do you pick yours?
I don't, because I did that for a while, that game of posting clips and posting it everywhere and doing all that extra work. And maybe it's a little bit different, easier. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know how your inner workings of your show goes, but it's a thing where I would spend all this time, especially like if I'm doing 2 to 3 episodes a week, prepping them. Like yesterday, I spent most of the day getting the next like 3 to 4 episodes artworks done, and then converting all the files so that way, like, and leveling them. So when I'm ready to go, I just got to dump them in and kind of as much of a template as I possibly can make it to where when I'm putting the episodes together, it's so easy. But it becomes this thing where I would spend so much more time doing that as well. And I'd post it everywhere, and then like I would literally see no difference in engagement, no difference in downloads, no nothing. And even posting the clips on YouTube weren't really generating much. And so it kept coming back to the thing of, if it's not bringing people to the episode, if it's not getting people to listen to it, or at the very least engaging on whatever platform it's on to drive that, metric, then this is a waste of time taking me from something else I could be doing that I would rather be doing. And it's kind of probably maybe to my own detriment, my own downfall, the show not growing bigger than whatever it is. But I keep coming back to the thing of, I guess I'd rather someone find it and actually take the time to listen to the whole thing than to be like, oh, this one clip, and then I never listen to anything beyond that clip. Essentially, all I would be doing is creating more of the same reasons I hate social media now, because it's a piece of information, but instead of getting and taking the time to take it all in, you're getting 1% of it and then making a decision based on that. And to me, it's like, that's not really the content I really want to create necessarily.
No, and I'm glad that you know that about yourself, because we are constantly trying to figure it out. There's no real thing. I think you and I have texted about this, of just like, we've had guests that have huge followings, but the show will do nothing. And then we'll have people that maybe have a smaller following, like Etzel Dope. So I remember Etzel Dope came on. Dope was just about to release an album. We're like, yeah, they had a song way back in the day. Like, it was a great conversation. He's a great guy. And his background is insane, like with his 3D stuff he does and all that. But the conversation was great, but we really didn't, to be honest, think it was going to do very well, but it did great. And then we had like Joe Magniello. I can never say his last name right. We had him on the show, and he's got like 1 million followers and all this stuff, and he reshared and posted, and the episode didn't really do much. And it's like, it's all what hits the algorithm and what fans that come to you are. Like, John loves wrestlers, and we've had some big wrestler shows on YouTube that have caught, traction through that scene, but that's not our core demographic. So we do this because we like them, but it's not really what our fan base, listener base wants to hear. And I out of all the group, internalize numbers more than anybody, where I'm like, fuck, dude, like, why is this one? I really thought this was going to do something, or I'm too analytical about it. And we all have each other to kind of slap each other in the face and be like, do you remember why we're doing this? It's 3 guys having fun. This is for us. And like you said, it's all about the opportunities. I mean, the amount of friends we've made just by doing the podcast, or opportunities, and it really is such a small world where everybody knows everybody when you really get into it. And it's all just about confidence of just, hey, I'm supposed to be here, I'm let's talk, So I don't know.
Well, I would even wonder for you guys, because I feel like, like the show is interesting. Like, you were asking me earlier how many episodes I've done, how long I've been doing it. And what's interesting is, there are some people that when they get, to where we are now, where it's like you kind of know how to, what your show is, how to do it, you're comfortable in what you know and how to do it. That a lot of people will go back through and delete the old episodes because they're like, oh, it's, as you were saying, the cringe episodes, the cringe years or whatever. Like, it's hard to look at those and not be like, oh my God, I don't want someone to stumble across this and be like, oh, this show sucks, and then never give it another shake. But to me, I think there's something kind of magical in that, because I would hope that the person who's going through it, if they like the show and there's something in there, which there, even in its crudest form, there should be the spark or the magic that makes that show. And so to me, I always liken it to being like a band's first record or the first recordings, where it's like, yeah, man, you may not like we'll take a band like Korn. do you think Korn likes how that first record sounds? I'm sure that there's parts where like, man, we made a mistake here. That tone's garbage. Oh, I could do this so much better. And they may go and re-record it, and that's totally up to them. However, I think us as the fans would be like, there's that magic though of when I first found this, and being able to follow a band's progression of this is where you started and this is where you are now, and you know, I really like the different areas and being able to see it or hear it or whatever. And I feel like we as podcasters, I guess for lack of a better term, go through the same thing where it's like, I would hope someone from episode 1, I still know that the spark of what makes me good for this was there. It may not sound the best, but it's like you can see that it's there. And then it's just a matter of fine tuning things and getting more comfortable with myself. But I think that's the more interesting thing about doing these kind of things. And I think even when you talk to people, like, I mean, look at your episode with Steph, you know, she was making the comment about the thing with Big Bill. She was really excited to do that bit with him for her social media or whatever, her YouTube channel, and it just didn't do anything. And she was like, oh, I thought it would do really well. And it's like, you can't go into anything thinking this is going to be the thing that really starts setting shit off. Like, I mean, you already alluded to, like, sometimes you'll have big guests and it doesn't do anything and the smaller ones just outperform them. And I don't think that it's necessarily indicative of either person being better or worse than. It's just the nature of the beast. Like, that's how people are. Like, it sometimes takes things a while to catch on. I mean, even to the flip side of, why does the YouTube version have like 100 times more downloads than an audio version of something that did terrible? And I think in doing this show, and I think probably you could admit to this too, it's interesting how you go into it thinking something was bad, and then you realize it lives somewhere else and it does better somewhere else. And you just kind of have to remind yourself at times that life doesn't happen the way you think it's going to. It's going to kind of unravel when it's supposed to. And those that are supposed to find it and need whatever from it will find that. And those that don't will just continue to carry on, and that's okay. But essentially, you always got to come back to your why. And, you know, I was telling Keith this during our chat, was during the pandemic when my numbers got like cut in half out of nowhere, and I don't know why, that I started kind of being like, well, why the fuck am I wasting all my time doing this? I could spend more time with my wife. I could spend more time doing something else. And then I had 2 really good conversations in one day, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't do this for anybody else. I don't do it for the likes. I don't do it for the comments or the engagement or the algorithm. I do it because I get something out of it. And at the end of the day, as long as I still continue to do that and feel that, it's the only reason I'm going to keep doing it. And everything else is just a happy byproduct of it.
That's the only way to do it. And it is taxing. Like, we call ourselves like a band, kind of, where, you know, someone's out of the, you know, not feeling it, and you go through the trials and tribulations. We really don't have any arguments in our group, but we do have, there are times, and you get just like what you talked about, where, you know, recently I went through a fun car. I'm like, dude, I think I might be done with this. Like I don't know, not that I'm having a bad time, but it's just like, I'm proud of what we did. It's taken a lot of time because we got regular jobs, right? And I'm like, this is stressing me out. It's not being fun. But then, like you said, you have one of those guests, or you do something and you're like, oh shit, this is why I'm doing it. You remind yourself of what it is. And I'm lucky that I do have the 2 other guys we do it with to kind of slap us, like I said earlier, saying, hey man, don't forget why we're doing this. It's not for that. And it's like, hey, if you need time off, we got you. Unfortunately, you are just you. So you don't have someone to kind of pick up the slack if you need a break or whatever. But a few things you said there, I just wanted to comment. It was just like, consistency too is key, and it's hard. Like, people who always be like, oh, I want to start a podcast. Hey, what? And they talk to me about it, and I'm like, you can try, but don't get discouraged in the beginning and be in it for the long haul. Because the reason why, honestly, on the podcast numbers, for the people who don't know at home, you really don't need that many listens to be a decent podcast in the grander scheme of things. YouTube's a different animal, right? And we were so frustrated of like, why are YouTube doing this, but our listens aren't? But we're getting accolades on our listenership, but I don't know. But then we had a drop recently too on our network and things of what the numbers were. And we had no rhyme or reason of like, why is that? And it's just like, you can't be focused on that. And we had King Vader on. He's a YouTuber on like years and years ago. And we try to take stuff that other YouTubers and podcasters say, because, like, we're all learning together. And King Vader said, hey, you might have these episodes that don't do anything now, but they live there forever, and something might hit, and then that's still going to get views all this time. So the bigger catalog you have, the more, people to find you and opportunities. And so the way we look at it like that is like, I would never delete our old stuff. Like, have you done that, or was other people you were saying do that?
Other people have done it.
Yeah.
There's episodes I've not put out.
Yeah. But then you just bank those, and we only have one that we haven't put out. And I'll tell you off air who it is, but it was,
I'd laugh if it's the same person I didn't put out.
No, I definitely don't think it wouldn't be the same person, but I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm all over the place. I do have some stuff I'm going to talk to you about later. That's okay. Not podcast based, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, something else I kind of wanted to pick your brain about, because I think it's an interesting thing and just a part of this that you just never expect to happen. But like, when you guys do this, I do not, because I kind of hate social media and trying to be more places than I want to be. But it's funny to me, like, not funny, that's the wrong word. It's interesting to me, like, the community it seems like you all have built. I'll see the comments, like, looking at the YouTube videos, like, I see some of the same people commenting. I'd imagine your Discord is exactly the same. Is it kind of been a trip to see the community and people that you probably know on first name basis that you communicate with probably on a daily basis through that?
Well, it's funny because we have different roles. So first, Johnny, originally it was Brandon did everything, and Brandon was paid, and I did it for free, and John paid, so he was in the negative. So Brandon's the only one making money on our podcast. And then I think last year we finally said, hey guys, this is getting ridiculous. We're all 3 equal parts or whatever of this. We all own what we do, and we make what we make. So with that, we all kind of started sharing responsibilities, and the Discord, I'm really bad at, like, technology wise. You can even see when I had it and when I stopped, like, I did all the little weird fonts on our little clips, but I got a 12-year-old, and I got frustrated because I think our social media could be better, and I think we should outsource it. So anyone listening out there who wants to be involved and is good at clip outs and stuff, hit us up. We just have jobs, and Brandon was doing it all, but we're trying to keep up, but it's just so much. You know what I mean? Like, trying to do the Instagram, trying to do this. I'm going to circle back to your thing. I wasn't good at the Discord. So yes, we have all the same people there that have been with us for years. We call them the filthy animals. And it is very weird because I'll go to like event shows, and like they'll come up to me because I know them from talking to on our Discord and things like that. But I'm not as involved in that. In fact, I don't even really like what we're doing right now. I think I told you no originally. And because right now I'm just over analyzing myself, that I'm over talking about stuff that no one cares about. But yes, that's a long way of saying yes. I do see the same people on there that follow us, and we have built a community. The problem with building a community, the original way the show is it was a music-based podcast, but that's not what we want. So I do think sometimes we alienate our guests by giving them comedians and things like that, which I think the grander people would like who have never listened to the show. So we're not just hitting the same stuff. But I do feel you can see sometimes that people are like, all right, enough of these comedians and wrestlers. Can you just get back to some metal people? Which is hard to balance what listeners want, but also keep yourself happy. Luckily, our diehards are fucking awesome, and they're in it for the long ride for everything. And that really keeps you going. Of just having those people that are like, hey, that one was cool, or I never knew about this. That's always what I love the most, is when people are like, I've never heard of this person. I heard that episode. Now I'm a fan of that person. And I feel like that's the kind of cool thing of sharing community. And then I also have a thing where I ask people, I'm really bad at it. I'm like, because I booked the guests. I'm like, give me your recommendations. And so there are a few, like Miles Kennedy. There was one listener who for years was asking for Miles Kennedy, and then we finally got it. And I remember messaging her because I knew she's a regular. I'm like, I got you who you wanted, you know what I mean? So that felt cool. But I do think I need to get better at kind of helping that community, because John does a good job of carrying it by himself. He's used to it from being Avenged Sevenfold for forever of the fan stuff. But no, I don't know. I don't know what I'm answering.
Do you feel in doing the show, have you noticed maybe how you are outwardly has changed? Because I feel like as someone who has only heard you on the podcast, and this is the first time we're kind of like face to facing, quote unquote, but you seem like someone who's kind of more not on social media to be like, hey, look at me doing these things. Like, you're kind of a very reserved person. Have you noticed that maybe the podcast has taken you more out of your own shell and made you more like do things that you wouldn't have expected?
Okay. So when I was younger, I'm an extrovert. I would never say I'm an introvert. But age, I've changed. So
I would say, when I was younger, sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead, please go.
I feel like maybe, I guess the better way I should have said it is, it seems like you are someone who, you're not an introvert, but your group of people that you are extroverted with is very tight.
Yes.
Is how I would put it. Okay.
So I've never been afraid of getting in front of, my dad was a New York Italian, really loud, boisterous. And so, I mean, like, it's funny how if you let me go, I'll just talk about nothing. But I because I grew up with a dad who fucking would bore me with his conversations, I am kind of analytical. That's why I've made already too many comments of how I'm not talking about anything important. But I've always been extroverted. When I was younger, I went to school to San Francisco State, and I worked for Interscope and in the marketing. And I was basically an intern, and then I got I was assistant to the marketing director of the West Coast, but it was basically just a paid internship. And my goal was to get into the music industry, but not as a band member in front of the spotlight. I wanted to be behind the spotlight. I don't like the pressure. I like the role of, hey, John, you can go ahead and do this. And then when I have a question, I'll just intervene something. It's been kind of nice with that. But I don't know. I'm not really in front of the spotlight guy anymore. When I was younger, man, I'd go streaking. I would go do it. It's like, hey, look at me. And then it's funny how people laugh of, like, my wife told me, I used to be like, I would tell stories at parties and stuff like that and look for the entertainment. And then now my wife is kind of a little more extroverted than I was. We've kind of switched roles. And she told me the other day, she goes, remember when you used to be funny at parties and entertaining and you used to talk? I was like, sorry. Now I just want to sit at my house and watch TV and only hang out with people I know that I don't have to be on for, you know what I mean? Because that's what it is. Like, you have, like, right now, you have to be on. It's not like you're just sitting, you know, with silences. You have to fill in those things. But I do find that day to day, I like this. I like being on camera because I found it has helped me in my personal to recalibrate the way I talk to people in social situations. Like, I have these in my day job, I'm a project manager, and I have these meetings, right? So I do think because of the podcast, I turn it on at my meetings, and people actually like being on my meetings because I'm upbeat. I talk to people like they're normal people. I'm fully aware of losing people. And I think in a normal work setting, you're having a meeting, you don't care if you're losing people. You're more about what you're saying. And I rewrote this. Oh shit. Sorry. Headphone dropped out.
Very good.
Usually people in a meeting are more about getting what they pre-wrote out. I'm more about keeping people engaged. So if I'm going off on a topic and I can see that I'm losing an audience because we have people like on camera, I'm like, I'll mix it up or make a joke or something like that, because I've just been on the other side of that so many times where I'm like, can you shut the fuck up and get to the point? You know what I mean? So yeah, no, I think the podcast has really helped out with that. Even like this weekend, we went to, we were backstage at catering for that wrestling event, and we're at a table and we asked to sit down. We sit down and everybody's silent. I'm the guy that feels like I have to say something like, hey, where are you from? Blah, blah, like I don't like silence. I have to fill it, probably to a negative, where someone who doesn't want to talk is like, can you please just leave me alone? So do you find it for you helping with your job of talking, or do you think you had that before and it's all one and the same?
So, I mean, and it's funny because like on the other show that's now out, the bar podcast that I do with two of my friends, it's funny because like they will, Chris and Rush, talk about how like better of a communicator I've gotten over the years, like since doing the show. And a lot of times something I learned how to do, and I used to be that person that was I would just talk your ear off. Like I'd find something that we were both into or that I'm excited about, and then I would just beat you down to it about it. And so it became this thing where, I had friends that kind of would be like, oh, you're a bit much, like small doses. And so I kind of had to learn how to like kind of tamper that down, but not in a sense of like where I'm inauthentic at that point, but just understanding that it's like I can get out the same conversation and actually have a conversation, but I don't need to be at 10. I can be at like a 6, and I still can have the conversation I want to have, and I can then be quiet. I can throw a question to you, like Chris Van Vliet, like I can ask you a question and then you might throw it back to me, or we go wherever the conversation goes. But I think the thing that I always was good at talking, I just wasn't great at listening, maybe. Like I wasn't an active listener. I think the problem I think a lot of us run into, and especially when you do something like this in this sort of capacity, or even when you're face-to-face with somebody, is kind of recognizing the nonverbals. Like if you're not interested, you might see someone who was leaning in, all of a sudden now they're leaning back. Kind of like you were saying, like the shut the fuck up and just get to the point. Okay, now I see you're doing that, so let me actually get to the point because I realize maybe I'm rambling or I've lost you, so let me get you back. Or that I'm not engaging you enough in the conversation and I need to do a better job, or that comes into play when you have a group of people, something I try to be better at, especially like
no, you're good at it, like, because I was
with
talking
my friends is to do things like that, is to like include them in the conversation somehow.
No, so you're great at that.
Alienating anybody.
Well, it's also, you have a hard time with, I'm already doing it right now. So with the online too, it's harder because it's not a delay, but there's a difference between talking here than it is in person, of letting other people talk or interjecting, thinking they're, you know what I mean? Like, and I have a hard time with that in this setting. Like if you and I were talking, I talk over people that I'll shut up or whatever, but it's harder for here. So a lot of times I find, again, I'm trying to not let there be silence. So I'm trying to be ready to talk. And then I find myself cutting people off too much in this setting that I normally wouldn't, I don't think, in real life, even though my wife probably says otherwise, that I just overtalk her all the time. But no, it's definitely an art. And I can see that, I don't think you overtalk. I think you do just a good job. But do you ever get comments like we've had this where Johnny, when we had Tobias from Ghost on, we always talk about it. It's the notorious issue one where everyone's like, "Will this guy stop talking and let Tobias talk?" Like, and it's one of those things. But Tobias honestly wasn't a big talker, so John was just filling in the thing. And obviously, these aren't Q&As. These are supposed to be more conversational than, I'm going to ask you a question and then you have the floor forever, or do you think this is more Q&A the way your format is?
For me, it used to be a Q&A, and honestly, like kind of beating a dead horse to this, and I'm sure if I'm surprised, honestly, no one has commented this, but I think it's just because of the nature of what I'm about to say that no one wants to be that asshole. But I think honestly going to therapy was a big game changer for me, because what I used to do, and I think I have them sitting right here if I felt like digging through this drawer that's next to me, I used to write out all my questions. Like on a note and paper, pen and paper, I would write everything out. And sometimes what I would learn is like I'd have a really good question, or what I deem to be a really good question. But I'm like, that's not a first question. You can't just come right out the gate. Like you can't come out guns blazing with this question. That's like all right, we're about 10, 15 minutes in. We've kind of established a rapport. Now let's kind of get there. But I also would treat it sort of like a creative writing project where it's like, okay, how do I get there? How do I get to this question? And so what I would in turn start doing is almost answering and having a one-sided conversation between me and a fictitious version of the person I was going to be talking to. And I never allotted for there to be the spontaneity or the discourse to just go somewhere else, because I was like, well, these are my questions and I got to ask them. They're so precious. I need to. Because part of it always was, if I'm taking the time to write it out, then I'm not going to ask bullshit, because that would be a waste of my time in addition to the guests. I ended up going to therapy though, and part of the thing that I needed to work on was not being in the moment, thinking about all the hypothetical what ifs and solving those that never came. And so in doing that, I realized that it's sort of an extension of how I should do the podcast. Like, I shouldn't think about all the questions that I'm going to ask, like maybe have one or two, but just be in the moment. And then whatever information I'm being given is how I proceed moving forward. And that's the most natural way to do this. And, I call them conversations. I think like most of us do that do this, that aren't an actual interview-based program. And I think it actually is a way better medium. It's a way better thing, because, I mean, like your most recent episode with Steph, like, would you have gotten to her getting cum on her eye and how it burns? Probably not. Like, that probably would have never came into...
That was in our questions. What are you talking about? We had that written out. We were going to... No, just...
But, I mean, it's like the amount of, like, those things, or, like, even in your ep with, like, Brandon from Bleeding Through, like, who I've had on the show a couple of times, and is a great dude. Like, just sometimes you have people, and you have to believe, I guess, that you are good enough on your feet, and the other person is going to be as an equal partner in the conversation. And if they're not, that's okay too. Like, you just need to know how to try to navigate and find the thing. To answer your question, yeah, 100% I've gotten I wish so-and-so would shut the fuck up and let the guest talk. But it's like, if you were in that room, if you were there in real time, like, I mean, even though you're listening to it and you are watching it, sometimes you don't get the vibe of, like, the other person just is like, and here's my answer and I'm done. Here's my answer and I'm done. And you have to keep it going, because otherwise it'd be even more awkward.
Everybody sits behind a computer and knows everything. You know what I mean? So,
well, I mean, indirectly, that's how I started the show, though.
No, but going back to what you said, the notes, but like the cringe era we talked about earlier, is I used to write out. I would research a guest. I would make all these notes. I would go to Johnny's. I would write it all out on a big. We would talk about it, and I'd write it on this giant ass whiteboard,
dry erase board.
Yeah, and then. It became an interview, and it was like you felt like you had to hit all these topics, and it felt sterile. And then once we got rid of that board and we said fuck it, and Dewey is a big person, like, why the hell are you guys doing that? Just keep it conversational. And ever since then, like, we research all the guests, but we don't write stuff down. Like, I'll write stuff and I'll text John before, hey, this person did this or whatever, just so he has it. But he doesn't make notes. It's all about, just mentally, because it is a conversation, and no one wants to listen to an interview anymore. It's like, that's dead. I feel like it's conversation. It's getting to know people more on a personal thing, not just the mask of here's what I have to talk about. So I don't know, but can we talk about reality shows and hip hop at some time?
Sure, absolutely. Because I was actually going to say, like, I was going to say, like, that was actually something I was going to segue into at some point, though, was, doing this. For the most part, like, it's sort of I don't want to say a drain on my marriage, but it's a thing where a lot of times I think my wife doesn't give a fuck who I'm talking to, doesn't care, but she enjoys some of the perks of doing this, getting to go to shows for free, getting to see, some different people that we've become friends with over the years, or I have become friends with, and subsequently so is she. But it became a thing where I remember, because she's currently watching Vanderpump Rules right now, and it's a funny thing that when you got, I can't remember who it is because I'm terrible. I call him the house hose of whatever. Okay. I call him the house hose of whatever city, insert whatever city here. And so that's what my wife and I call it. She's like, I got to watch my house hose. And I'm like, all right, good. Enjoy that. But it was funny because I remember when you guys got one of the people from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, I think is what it was.
No, Orange County. We're in Orange County.
Orange County? Okay. Yeah. Well, see, that's the problem with having two. It's like California teams. You got two California teams, and it's like, do you really need them?
It's the Dodgers
But,
and the Angels. That's what we got, right? Yeah.
There you go. But it was funny because I remember being like, oh shit. Like, and I remember thinking to myself, because at one point I was trying to get Sandoval, I think around the same time, because he was doing the Most Extras, starting to do the Most Extras tour. So I was like, well, fuck, man. Like, if they were able to get someone from this Bravo sphere of people, and granted you live in the area and that might help a little bit more, but I was like, maybe getting someone from that isn't impossible. And so I was trying to figure out.
We got in trouble for that one, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I'm not in trouble. So apparently Gina, she is my favorite of the Orange County Housewives. And back to our wives, like we talk about. So it was my wife's birthday that week, and my wife doesn't give a shit. Most of the people we have on, she's like, I'm like, dude, we got this person. She's like, oh, that's great, fine, that's awesome. But when I said Gina, she's like, oh, I might have to swing over on that one. And that one with, I knew Johnny didn't watch the show regularly, but his wife did, and people love when his wife comes on. So I was like, hey, why don't we have your wife as co-host? She watches the show, and it'd be fun. So my wife, Johnny always makes fun of me because I was like, my wife. I turn into Borat every time I say my wife.
Yeah.
So my wife came over for that one, but we recorded with her, and her management, who's super, super nice, emailed us afterwards and was like, hey, we just got slapped on the wrist that we didn't get Bravo approval or go through Bravo to book this. Can you not release this episode until the show comes out? And we're like, okay. So we actually sat on that one for several months. And when we recorded, she didn't even know if she was going to be on the following season, but we didn't want to alienate her to ruin that shot. So while we got lucky, I do think it's a little harder. And anything TV, I don't know if you've had this, any actor, Hollywood is different than music. I feel like music is more like if people want to do things. Hollywood's more like you have to go through this person to get to this person. If this person doesn't know or doesn't like this, then you don't get that. And you never actually get I don't ever get hurt by that because I don't think half the stuff get to the people that you're trying to ask. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've literally talked to people and they're like I bumped into them and I don't think they're just being nice or like, you know, they're like literally like, I didn't know that. Like, oh, yeah. Well, yeah, sure. Well, I'll come on, you know, and it's the vetting that goes before that in Hollywood it's just so seen and stupid. I hate it. So I don't know. But like Taron Killam, yeah. I reached out to his manager. I got ghosted 3 years after. I think it was a toy I posted with Rick Glassman, and he looked at my account and for some reason looked at his messages, DMs. And I had sent him. He goes, "Sorry, this is 3 years later, but I would love to come on the podcast. In fact, my brother his favorite band is Avenged Sevenfold, but like when I went through the publicist, that never translated to him because I know if he literally came to the house and he did all this stuff, like he would have said yes then, but it never even got to him. So yeah. I'm done being offended by that stuff because I just know how it is, and I'm sure you get it too. But. Yeah,
I mean, the amount of like, even with people I know personally that like texting, it's like I know Patrick from Ice 9 and I have been texting and going back and forth like, yeah, we need to get together and do another podcast. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And like I hit him up the other day. I was like, how do you feel? Like it probably won't come out on this day, but how do you feel about doing one on St. Paddy's Day or like like that weekend? So like we'll just drink and bullshit like we always do. And he hasn't replied back, but I'm also like, dude, you've also been touring nonstop for like fucking since I've known you. Years. And you're still working on your solo shit that you keep doing, and you know, and probably just enjoying being home. And I know you're like, you know, in a relationship now, so I'm sure you just like want to chill the fuck out. So it's like I could be slightly upset and be like, oh, well, I want to do the thing, but it's also like you're a fucking person, man. Like we'll get to it whenever we get to it, and even if we don't, okay, who gives a shit? It's fine. It's not
it's not hard
the end
too
of
because
the world, and
planning is harder than just like if you're picking up like that's the whole thing is like you have to make a production of it. That's the unfortunate thing about podcasting is like literally if he was like, yeah, let's do it right now, I'm free, you know, but because it's podcast, it's like, hey, we got to set it up, and it feels more serious than it really is. You know what I mean? So sometimes I feel like people put too much into it, like, oh, I got to be prepared. It's just like, no, man, just get on. Let's just shoot the shit, you know? So yeah, but it's hard to when you don't. You knew that guy, so that's different. But
I mean, like that speaks to the microcosm of how hard it is. Like, I mean, in some instances between either a publicist and or the person, if I know them and have shot DMs and stuff like that, like it sometimes gets really fucking hard to like nail it down. And I mean, there was one person that it took me like 4 years. The person agreed to do it. I went through them. It was Jesse from Misery Signals. Like, I was like, hey, I'd really love to have you on the show. And he was like, yeah, let's just wait for this to happen. And at the time, like that thing was going to be in like 2 months. And I was like, sure. And then that tour that they were waiting to be announced turned into, well, we're also starting to write new music. So maybe let's wait until that's, because we're going to put out a single. And then the single turned into, well, now we're actually going to write a record. Now we're touring, now we're doing other stuff, and it was just like, let's just keep waiting until we can talk about everything, which I understood. But it was literally like 4 years from the initial, like, hey, do you want to do this, to it finally happening. But I think, and again, kind of going back to what I said, I think if we had done it at any other point other than when we did, I don't think the episode would have been as good. Because all that 4 years, in that 4 years, he and I built a rapport that we wouldn't have had. In that 4 years, we became different people, experiencing different things. And I think we're able to, in some instances, I felt more comfortable asking harder questions that I'd always wondered. Being a big fan of that band and some of the problems and things that have happened within that group. And I think with where they were at that time and him being back in the band for as long as he was versus being freshly back in that band, I don't think he would have answered half of the questions as honestly as he did, because he didn't have enough time to be removed. So it's a thing where I think, and that's why whenever these things don't pan out, or if someone doesn't see a DM or someone doesn't, allow the thing to happen, I go, it'll happen eventually. Or if it doesn't, it just wasn't meant to be, and that's okay. But at least
that's the key is
that's the big thing. I got to get better about just asking, because too often I think we get in our own heads about being like, I sometimes will still have the thing of like, I'm really afraid to ask this person because I feel like in my head someone's going to get this and be like, my whole fucking day's ruined now because you asked me this question. And I know that's like such an outlandish thing to think, but it's how I feel.
So
sometimes
you have validation of that. So it's funny because I mean, yes, my wife always talks about how I'm like a name dropper of stuff, of people she doesn't even fucking care about. But like
same,
as like, I'm sure you talk about your podcast all the time. Like it's part of you. Like it's a hobby. Mm-hmm. It's like my interest. It's like what I like to talk about. So if you talk to me off the street, at some point I will probably end up mentioning my podcast or mentioning toys. Like those are the two passions I have. Just like some people like pickleball, and it's like, hey, they're looking for an opportunity to talk about pickleball. I try to read the room of like, if people don't really care, I'll shut up. But if someone shows interest, I will gladly keep talking about it. But Johnny is really funny because I'm always like, dude, just fucking ask this person like to come on the podcast. And he's got a thing, and I totally get it. Like you have an image where you don't want to seem like you're asking or doing certain things. But I'll tell a quick story. So even this weekend, we were backstage at AEW, and Diamond Dallas Page is an old wrestler for those who aren't into wrestling, and DDP Yoga. Some people know him. And John has always told me this story about how back in the day, he met up with Avenged somehow, and he wanted to come out to a show, and John thinks like he had a girl and he wanted to come kind of impress her or whatever and go backstage. But when DDP went to the show afterwards, something happened with the band where they ended up not connecting, or there was an issue or whatever. They didn't see each other afterwards. So John always thought like, I hope he's not pissed that we're trying to big time him or snub at him or anything like that. So that's the backstory. But I've actually reached out and been ghosted about trying to get him on the podcast. And but he was backstage, and we're there maybe 3 hours with him watching the event, and DDP's like walking by, and I can see Johnny like looking at him and like making eye contact to say, hey, how's it going? Like to start the conversation. And I kept going like, dude, just walk up to him and be like, hey, good to see you again, Dallas, blah, blah, blah. Just don't make it a thing. But he was just like, I don't want to be that. He always says, don't be a punisher. He calls me a punisher all the time. But I'm like, there's a difference of not being intimidated to talk to someone and just, we're all humans, right? I would go up to a person on the street like, hey, I really like your shirt. How's that? You know, I'll talk to them. Do the same thing to anything. But he, for some reason, because he's been on the other side of it, of people just coming up and him be like, leave me the fuck alone. So I get why he feels that way. But it's really funny. So literally one time he walked by and I saw John kind of raise his hand to like go out and shake. And then he just walked by and he goes, nope, that's not it. Nope, next time. I'll get him next time. So when John was away, he was watching the monitor. I snuck over to DDP when he wasn't really talking to anybody. And I said, hey, Dallas. He goes, hey, how's it going? I go, hey, sorry to bug you. I go, you know the band Avenged Sevenfold, right? He goes, oh, yeah. I go, so my buddy Johnny's over there. He's, from Avenged Sevenfold. He's, oh, he's here? Oh, where is he? I go, yeah. I just want to talk to you real quick about it. So he tells me the story, and I told him the story you did about how he feels like he might have been upset. And I said, hey, can you do me a favor? And when you go up and if you bump into him and talk to him, can you give him a really hard time and tell him that you're really pissed and how he ghosted you in this time and all this time you've been holding this resentment? And he goes, no, man, I can't do that. That's not nice. And I was like, okay, well, you do whatever. And I walked back, and like 2 minutes later, DDP walks up and he goes, Johnny Christ of Avenged Sevenfold, Mr. Too Big ghosted me at the show. Good to see you this many years later. And John's like, oh, fuck. And I could just see his face like, and then DDP's like, I'm just fucking with you. And it was pretty fun that he went on the prank. And then he told all these amazing stories. And then John, just off the cuff, mentioned the podcast. And he goes, oh, you have a podcast? Let me come on. And so it's just back to your story of like, you never know what gets to people. And he's like, oh, let me get your number. And he went to call. He goes, look, I even got your number. And afterwards, John was even like, dude, you fucker. He goes, man, you even got him to put my phone number in his phone. I'm like, no, dude, he had your phone number. You've just been a pussy this whole time, not talking to him. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think like, I don't know, right. I think like what gets kind of interesting too is sometimes I think, at the end of the day, we're still fans of these people that we're having on. I mean, like for me, and this kind of will segue into something that you mentioned earlier you wanted to talk about, but I think it's been hard for me to get into is showcasing some more of the stuff I love. So it's like I've dipped my toes into the wrestling world. Like, I had RJ City on a long time ago and had a blast talking to him. I had Preston way back when he was still doing the indies because he's from out here in Detroit. And even did one with, there's somebody else I did one with that I'm blanking on now. But I had another wrestler. I think almost everybody is in AEW now, ironically. Right. I was trying to get way back in the day when he was still on the independents, was trying to get Brian Pillman Jr., but he had just suffered another like leg injury. So he was like, oh, I'm rehabbing and doing that. Like I have nothing to promote. And I was like, well, it's kind of the best time to come on and do the thing. Yeah. Cause like, there's nothing to promote. Like there's no like, I have to talk about this thing. It's just like, well, it's just bullshit. And then he was like, oh, let me get through the rehab, maybe get some bookings, and then maybe I'll do it again. And then, got way too big and was like really hard to lock him down. But it's a thing where it's kind of funny because like sometimes like doing that or even like trying to get hip hop people on the show, like that has been pulling fucking teeth for me. Like one of the biggest like ones I had way back in the day, before Post Malone was like really Post Malone, when he was still doing like 2,000 seat like club rooms and stuff like that, or like small theaters. He was coming around here, had 21 Savage with him, and I'd reached out to both publicists, heard nothing back from Post Malone's people, but at the time I had someone who knew Adam DeGrosse, his photographer. So I was trying to go.
He's calling.
So I was trying to go through the friend, because that's the other thing too. When you start doing a bunch of these things and knowing people in the touring industry, someone knows somebody who is like maybe not in your world, but is in this other peripheral thing. So it's like, always, that's why I always say, like, when people are like, how do you know this band? Or how do you know, like, like my friend that is the drummer for Train, they're like, how the fuck do you know someone from Train? And I go, so when I used to book shows, he was in this band from New York that I had booked, and like just kept in touch with him. And then over the years, like he became a studio musician to then now he's the drummer for Train. So when Train comes around, that's how I know the guy from Train. Because I used to book not shitty bands, but I used to book small bands in small club or small rooms, and I just stayed in contact. And some of these people go on to do other things. But I remember reaching out to 21 Savage's people. His I don't know if it was his manager or someone within the camp got back that they were okay, like signing off, like it's got my vote of approval. If you want to proceed, go ahead and do it. Basically, I don't know who hopped in on the email thread at that point, but someone basically off of the thread and just to me, I think, sent me a thing that was like, we checked out your shit. And this is like years ago. They're like, you have some really big names in your world, but you don't have anyone on this side of things, and we're not gonna be the first.
That's so frustrating.
And
that hurts my heart.
I appreciated the honesty instead of just avoiding it or
the reply is a bullshit
reason. Yeah. But like, it was a thing where I was like, that really fucking sucks. Like, I get it. The show doesn't look like it's going to be this thing, but just because it doesn't look like that doesn't mean that I have no interest in this or don't have any knowledge of it. So that's why it was like so huge, and why I like really fought to get Vin from Naughty by Nature on for my 400th episode, because it was like Naughty by Nature changed the game for me growing up, like watching, their music videos back in the day. Like, it was, and thinking, and I knew the thing for me that I wanted to focus on was more of the branding and the business side, because it seemed like that group always was so business minded. Like, you think back to like them and like Onyx and stuff like that, and like everyone had multiple different variants of the t-shirts, the sweatshirts, the bandanas. Like, they were so brand forward, in addition to having good songs, that it was just like, where did that come from? Because that now seems like an obvious, like look at Drake with OVO, Rough Riders, like DMX Rough Riders, like as a logo, as a brand. Like, everyone is a brand as well as an artist. But you go back to the late 80s, early 90s, that wasn't the thing. So for Naughty by Nature to be so ahead of thinking about that, I think is only added to the legacy of why they're still around, why they're still important, is because they've always had that business mindedness to them. And I even told Vin, like at the end, I was like, thank you so much for coming on the show, because you could have just been like most people in your genre and been like, fuck that, I ain't doing this. But you're giving me the opportunity, and whether I crush it or whatever, like, it means a lot to me, because this scene, this style of music I grew up on it. Like, I'm a product of MTV, I am a product of the 90s, and like hip hop and stuff like that, that was kind of when it started really kicking off. And I would love to showcase it more, but like, no one wants to fuck with and do it. No one wants to come on and do it.
But don't you think that that's an old mentality? So like, look, Megan the Trainer, or Megan the Trainer, Megan the Stallion. That's a mashup right there. Megan the She just had Stallion. Like what? Had Spirit Box on a track, and Dolly Parton's doing metal, and it's just like all these there. And we talk about this on our show a lot too. Is like, there's no real genres anymore. Everything is crossed and almost elitist, or not wanting to be the first. It's like, you could be missing an opportunity to actually find a new audience, or, hey man, the two might hit and you have something big, but everyone's just kind of like, I don't want to be this, I don't want to be that, I'm this and I'm that. And it's like, to me, in the modern day, I mean, even look at Epitaph Records as it was a punk label growing up, and now if you look at the artists, half of them are like Post Malone, like they're all like hip hop, like rappers and things like that. And it's one of those things, like, you can't get too offended about it. It's like, whatever, you got your brand, you have your image of what you're going to do with that. I don't agree with it, but whatever. I just wish that more people, and you made a comment of like, hey, we don't want to be the first. And that's kind of my thing with the Hollywood thing. It's like, we have all these big ones with metal guys and things like that, but we want to have actors. Why don't you come on? Like, help this trend. Like, do this. We're looking for, I don't know. I guess it's hard to say that when people are strangers and you're like, I don't know if I want to take a chance with someone I don't even know.
Right.
But it's just so hard. Like, and it's such a fucking, you got to flash your dick of like, oh, we've had this person and this person on. Oh, okay, well, cool. Now I'll come on. It's like, well, I asked you 2 years ago when I didn't have those people on and you didn't want to do it, but now it's the cool. It's like high school. You know what I mean? It's kind of silly.
Yeah. The amount of, I like to call it the, will you fuck me now? Is my dick big enough for you? Thing where it's like, right. when you're sending out emails or requests, sometimes like it doesn't happen as often anymore, because like I just have that rapport now with a lot of publicists that they know who I am, they know what I'm about.
Well, that gets easier, and I don't over time.
Yeah, But it's a thing where there's sometimes like where it's like I'll ask for someone and they're like, can you send us like some stats and like who you've had on? And then it's like, it's a thing where sometimes like and usually what I'll revert to is because like I'll go back and be like, oh, I should go with not necessarily the biggest name, but like episodes I'm really proud of and be like, check this one out, check this one out, check this one out. And I've done that. And then I realized like a lot of times you could tell that no one even checked out what I curated for them. And then so then I was like, okay, fine, I'll give you what you want. Yeah, I've had someone from Ozzy Osbourne's band. Yeah, I had so-and-so from Five Finger Death Punch. Yeah, I had Jake from Greta Van Fleet. Yeah, I had so-and-so from this band. And I just like take like the biggest names I've got. And then it's just like, here's 10 of the biggest names. Is that good enough? Do you want to fuck me now?
But
Like,
they're not necessarily even your best work, right?
No.
Because just because they're a big name.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, like, the one with Ivan Moody, the only reason I did it was because at the time he was promoting, like, a CBD line he was doing. And, like, they were like, we're not doing, don't talk about music, don't talk about Five Finger, like, it's solely for this. And you get in for, like, 15 minutes. And I was like, fuck it. Like, it's a name. And maybe if I do well with this, like, it'll earn me the right, or he'll be like, hey, this was fun. Let's do it again, like, in another capacity. And the thing that I had going for me was, you know, I was talking about, you know, how hard was it to come up with your CBD line? What is it that separates yours from this? How did you find actually, you know, different laws and shipping things and da-da-da? Because, like, my wife works in the pharmaceutical world. So I had an understanding of that side of shit that I knew no one fucking would have. And so is my conversation with Ivan the greatest conversation with Ivan you're ever going to hear? No. But if you want to hear a kind of interesting conversation with Ivan about his CBD line that he was pretty excited about at the time, I don't know if he still is, and hear a completely different conversation than probably anyone else would have with him in 15 minutes, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. Same with like Jake from Greta Van Fleet. I saw Greta Van Fleet when they were playing a local festival here in front of 15 people, years before they became the band that everyone knows now. There's video that my wife took at the time of us seeing them playing, ironically enough, a Led Zeppelin cover. And it's a thing where I remember hopping on the opportunity when I was still writing for a local online magazine thing here. And I was trying to do a feature on them of like this band from, you know, way the fuck up north that just kind of blew up out of nowhere and all this kind of stuff. And publicist is like, oh my God, you actually know who this band is? Yeah, we'd love to give you time with the guys. And I was like, sweet. And I had just started the podcast at the time, so I was like, I'll ask my questions, I'll write my feature, and then I'll use the audio portion for my podcast. And they're like, okay, so we're giving you 15 minutes. Or I think they gave me 10 minutes. And I was like, ugh. And I got real discouraged because I'm like, what the fuck can you even talk about? If I'm writing a feature on these guys, what can I get out of 10 minutes worth of a conversation to write a feature?
Well, people don't warm up until 50. Like, I always get frustrated. I almost want to start a podcast where we just cut the first 15 minutes out of it, or the first half an hour, because no one really warms up. Like the first of this, like I probably lost half your listeners in the beginning because I was talking all over the place. But like now you warm up, and all the good stuff comes the second half of podcasts when people start letting their guards down. They start feeling comfortable, and you get a rapport with how each other are. You know. So I feel you. Like 10 minutes is nothing. You can't even warm someone up on that.
But I've also learned to take that as an interesting challenge and be like, okay, I'm given 10 minutes. Let's make it the best fucking 10 minutes that it can possibly be. And like, is that the right approach? I don't know. Maybe I should have just been like, no, I'm not. Like, you know, Dewey and I go back and forth on this. There's like, I just tell people if they can't give me an hour, I'm not even interested. And I'm like, I understand that line.
It depends on the name.
100%.
To be real.
But it's like, you know, if you're going to give me, granted, a bad name because, you know, I'm one person removed away from this person now, but it's like, if I wanted to somehow try to get Chino from Deftones, it's like, if someone was like, you can have 10 minutes with him, I'd be like, fuck it, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Don't worry, Chino's on Johnny's label. They've toured together. They're even doing shows in Europe this summer, and I still can't get Chino to come on the show. So,
gotta go through Dewey.
Well, yeah. No, I totally feel you on all that. And it's funny. Do you feel like sometimes it's funny how you get these things of like, don't talk about this? So we had Fred Armisen on the show from Saturday Night Live, and we got wind that he was going to be doing tours of the Punk Rock Museum from the Punk Rock Museum people when we were there. And I was like, oh shit, I'm going to wait for that announcement because they said that he wanted to go on talk shows to promote the museum, and I was like, oh fuck. When that gets announced, I'm totally going to hit him up. And I did, and he said yes, and he came on to talk about it. And we had this whole plan where we were just going to talk about music because he probably is sick of Saturday Night Live and all this stuff. And we started talking about it, and he talked about his old band stuff, but he's a mellow guy as it is. But then we kind of mentioned Saturday Night Live, and he was giving us stuff, and he kind of lit up more talking about that stuff that we thought he was just going to be completely burnt out on. So it's really hard that you can't really go in with any agenda on any of these. Like you talked about the guy with the weed stuff, like don't talk about music, and you got to be prepared for that in podcasting. But you also got to kind of, even if people tell you, try to sneak one in to see if it lights.
As of right now, when this episode airs, like the episode I'm about to mention will have been out for a couple of weeks, but that's how I was with, because I got Tim from Esley Dying. And so the whole thing, I had kind of pushed, like, I really would like to talk to Tim. And the publicist is like, okay, it's no outside of, like, it's basically Austrian Death Machine. That's what he's here to promote. No outside music conversation, just laser focus on this one thing. And that's all you're really to talk about. Now, this kind of goes to sometimes knowing when to trust your gut and be like, I could do that, but it's not who I am and it's not what I do. So how do I do that? Like, how do I tread carefully to do that? Now, thankfully, like, I had an ace in my back pocket where I had Ken Susi, who's now in the band, and him and I are friends. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to have Tim on, and I want to ask questions. Like, I want it to be like a normal episode, but like, do you think, like, I'm being told don't talk about these things, don't ask about anything other than this one thing. Do you think Tim would be into that? Like, him. And he was like, yeah, I think as long as you just, like, he was like, even if you just mentioned like you're friends with me, like that should help you open the door to like allow that to start being a thing. And then if anyone gets mad, throw me under the bus. So it's fine. And so I remember like day of, I was like, how would you feel about like surprising Tim? And instead of me saying like, hey, I know Ken, because like anyone can say like, oh, I know Ken. But I was like, how do you feel about popping on for a minute and then just like, busting balls maybe for a minute and then, like whatever, like once he realizes like, oh, you actually do know Ken. Okay, cool. Like maybe I'll open up a little bit more. Well, Ken ended up staying on for the whole episode. And as a result, I think because and I think the interesting thing though is I think it allowed us to have a more honest conversation about certain things and even segueing into, just personal life and just things that I don't know that I would have been comfortable trying to bring up any other way. But Ken took it in certain directions where I was like, oh, I'm glad you took it here because now it gives me the permission to ask this question. And, at the end, I think we chatted for about like an hour and a half. And it's like, I'm seeing stuff like, and the only thing that's like kind of worrisome at this point is like, I know because Tim's not doing a ton of press right now. I think I've seen him do 3 things since I've done mine. Every single thing has been picked up by a news website, and I'm like, fuck. And like, and all the things that are getting picked up are pretty insignificant in my opinion. So I think like some of the things that we discuss where it's like we're having a real honest conversation about, growth of a person, growth as an artist, and some of the things just in general, like having his wife involved with things now and she's on the new Austrian Death Machine record and all these kind of things. We were talking about like there's a handful of things where I'm like, fuck, I just know this is going to get picked up. Like I just know some site's going to pick up on it and be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And it'll be like, yeah, that was said, but it's totally out of context. But the thing is like, I can't cut that out because because I don't want that to happen because it's going to take away from the genuine conversation we're having. And so I'm just kind of like torn at this thing where it's like, I'm glad that I went on my own and did something and called an audible, like bringing in Ken and having Ken be a part of this thing that ultimately made this thing really great. But now I'm on the other side worried like, fuck, who's going to run something stupid that has nothing to do with anything and now might make the publicist come back on me and be like, I thought I told you to da-da-da. And I'd be like, yeah, you did. And I'm sorry.
We have a really hard... One of the things that we made early on about this is that One thing we do is we give our audio back to the guest and or publicist management for review at least 24 hours before. We a lot of last minute shit. We're a lot better now, but we always say, hey, we're going to give you the audio before. If there's anything you need cut, tell us. Because John's been on the other side of this way too many times where people just cut shit and make that the thing. So we always give people that opportunity so that they can't come back to us later and say, "Hey, you just are trying to get headlines in here," because that's not our goal. The other thing that we always do is we've had so many stuff, and we've texted. I'm like, I would love to put this little clip out. It would go so viral, but we don't want to pander to that. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, if I just clip this out, it would go crazy. But we do try to keep our moral compass in, going north and not doing that. But it's hard. And honestly, it's like that is the low. Our numbers could be a lot bigger if we followed that model, but I probably couldn't sleep at night as much, so.
Well, the other day, and I'm not going to mention necessarily who it was because I don't want to divulge it. Like, I'm out here like not spreading shit or starting shit, but like there was someone I had on the podcast recently, and we were talking about music that this person had, how they were sitting on all this material and then started this other band, and were using a lot of the material that just fell by the wayside. And being friends with one of the other dudes in the band, they're like, yeah, it's kind of a bummer that like this material that was meant for us now is in this other thing. And I remember mentioning it to them when I ran into him at the Pantera show, and like half of the band was there, and I was like, yeah, everyone's been really stoked on it. And I was like, other than, so-and-so saying this and seemingly kind of butthurt about it. And they're like, and one of the dudes in the band's like, oh, don't do that. Like, we're actually getting along really well right now. Don't start this shit. And I was like, and like kind of joking, but it did bother me later into where the point, like where I texted my friend, I was like, hey man, I'm really sorry if like that came across as me trying to be shitty and like start shit. I just was kind of like taken aback by it because I was like, well, this is music that's like 15 fucking years old. And if you didn't, if you didn't like it then or didn't put lyrics to it or didn't write something else to go with it, then at that point you've already said like it didn't move you, it didn't resonate with you, and I don't care. Essentially is kind of how I would take it. So that person is free to then take that thing that they've written and go find somewhere else that it's wanted. Like, why wouldn't you? But it was a thing where like I remember texting my friend and I was just like, I'm really sorry if that like caused any problems or, if it's a thing. Like I didn't mean for it to like, I didn't realize in the moment how like shitty it probably sounded when I said that. Like I was just kind of saying it to kind of be funny, but I don't know. I guess I didn't really think much of it at the time. I just said something. The filter between my brain and my mouth just wasn't working at that point, and I just said what the first thing that came to my mind. And I was like, I'm really sorry. Like I have more integrity than that, and I don't want that out there. And he's like, well, that's why you're you in this show. Like your show has a certain like everyone knows that if you're on it, like you're not trying to do that. And I was like, well, yeah, I hope so. And I think that goes a long way. Like, and again, are there shows that are quote unquote bigger, better, whatever, sure. But like some of these shows, like every time I see a headline of a certain degree, I know exactly where it came from. Before I even click on the headline to see the article, I already know where the show came from because it's someone that was sort of in the inner circle of podcasts that I kind of came up with. And, they told me how they work on shopping headlines and stuff. And it's something I used to do as well. But it's a thing where like, I remember Dewey and I talking where he was just like, all that's going to do is make people not want to come on your show. And I was like, hey, you're probably right. So I stopped doing it.
We've never, I don't think we've ever shopped them, but
you've definitely had shit picked up from your show though.
but we haven't lately. And it's really funny you sparked me thinking about it. It's like, I think what it was, Blabbermouth used to do shit all the time. And when Blabbermouth gets it, then it kind of, other people will pick it up. And I personally don't have anything about, I get what they do. And I honestly, we used to talk shit on the podcast. We'd be like, oh, here's the Blabbermouth one, blah, blah. And literally we mentioned it multiple times and they stopped reporting on us. I think, it's one of those bittersweet things where I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. that they picked up, and I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm making this up in my head, that they're like respecting, like, oh well, we won't alienate your podcast, but at the same time, I'm like, hey man, it helps, but we won't be that guy. But if you want to be that guy from our podcast, great. So
yeah,
but like even it bit us in the butt with Wes Borland.
Oh,
that is probably
our pretty big.
Our biggest episode, because it got picked up by People Magazine. It got picked up by all these things. And the headline everyone chose, which, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even picked it out, was that Fred Durst was making them sit on the record because he wasn't happy with the tracks they had, or something. I don't even remember what it was. It was something like that. And it was a great episode with Wes. He talked about all of his project. I think it's one of our best episodes, but it hurt us getting Fred on. Who knows what's real, so I'm not going to put this out there that it's concrete, but Fred apparently was not happy with Wes for doing that and saying that. But Wes, I don't think he had intent on. It wasn't like he was saying it out of malice. It was just taking out context for headlines. And so I reached out to try to get Fred on, and I'm a huge Limp Bizkit fan. Like, no shade, because we would still love to have him on. But I reached out, and I don't. Again, to my thing where maybe I don't play the game as well as everybody else. I reached out to his management. I was like, "Hey, we'd love to have Fred on." Blah blah blah. And they replied, "Fred wants to know why you want him on." And so I'm like, "What? Now I got to jerk you off to like get you off?" But I was real honest. I was like, "Hey, man, we are big fans. I'd love to talk to you about your movie stuff. Like, I don't hear anybody really talking about his movie stuff as much."
I was just going to say, if I were to get him on, I would ask about his movies or directing music videos and all that.
Well, you can try throwing it out there. It didn't work for us. And I was like, we'd like this and just, the common things, and talk about you and your life and anything you want to talk about. That's what we like to do. Anything that you don't normally get to talk about that you want to talk about, bring it on. Like, we don't have to talk about the latest project if you're like sick of talking about it, or you've talked about this one album too many times. What do you want to talk about? You like to crochet? Teach me about crocheting. Let's do this. So my response is like all this stuff. And I sent it to him, and I didn't get a response back. So later I just passive aggressively wrote an email to the manager. I go, "I guess we didn't pass the test?" ? And that's all I wrote. It was like, was that not good? Or like even I mean, John's not on here, and John doesn't do any of this. So anything I say does not represent him. I'll say it full disclosure here. But sometimes I do shit, and he's like, "Dude, why the fuck did you do that?" So Everescent, Amy from Evanescence. I was like, "Oh, she's got, let's reach out, blah blah." And honestly, you talked about people wanting to know about metrics and stuff. I try to include that as much. And I know I write stuff too long where I think it gets lost, and half the shit that I provide people don't care. But I come from the school of like, I'm going to give you everything, so you don't have to ask me any questions, and anything you want to know is right here. Here's a link. This is how we do stuff. Blah 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 blah. We'd love to have you. So this publicist wrote back, and she goes, "Well, can you give me your metrics or your numbers and all this stuff?" And I was like, "Fuck." So then I was like, "Brandon, can you pull all this stuff? Because we don't normally provide that." So I was like, "Here." And then when I sent it, I was like, "Here you go. I feel like I'm on The Bachelor. I really hope I get the rose on this one." And and the lady wrote back. I could tell she felt bad because she's just doing what the machine
doing her job
makes her do. Yeah. And she's like, "I'm really sorry, but it's just, I actually worked for Revenge before on some stuff." And I could tell by her response, and I go, "Hey, I'm just messing with you. I totally know you're doing your job. I'm just making light, talking to you like I would any other human,
Yeah.
But no, the game gets hard, man. And especially booking and things like that it's, it's, I don't know why I told that story, but we all go through it.
I was like, those things are kind of funny though, because like it's twofold. Two quick stories I'll share to that.
Sevenfold? Like, okay, go for it.
Sure. Well, like my favorite is like, there's been a handful of guests like that I've had on, and I forget who it was specifically. It might have been Mike from Stained, like the second time I had him on, and someone on YouTube left this shitty comment. They're just like, "How the fuck do you get these great guests? Your show sucks. You have no audience." And then I just was like, I like left this shitty thing. So then I went and looked at his thing, and like his YouTube channel was like him doing something. I don't remember what his thing was, but like it was a stupid hobby, we'll say. And then so I wrote, like, I copy and pasted his comment on one of his videos, and then he flagged me for hate speech. And then so I flagged his.
Pussy.
And then he sent me a message, and I was like, he was like, dude, what the fuck's your problem? I go, dude, you literally came onto my thing and just left a shit comment. All I did was copy and paste your fucking shit comment on your fucking video. I go, didn't feel so great, did it? And he goes, well, it had nothing to do with anything. I go, and neither did your comment.
Right.
And he was like, well, but like, I legit don't understand like how you get these people. And I was like, maybe it's all the fucking work I put in behind the scenes that you don't see. Maybe I'm a really nice.
You can also say it a lot nicer. Yeah,
no, 100%. And then so like finally like, but that was like a transition when I had changed over to this, and it wasn't my face and my name on everything technically. That I was just like, when people are rude and shitty, I'm just gonna be rude and shitty back. Like that was a mentality I came up with a couple of years ago working at a bar, and I just got tired of like people being rude to me for no reason. Like they would just like, and then so I was like, I'm matching energy. Like if you're gonna be a fucking prick to me, I'll be one right back to you. It costs me nothing, and I don't give a fuck because I don't know you and I don't care. Like. And it's been funny to see, like, when you start doing that, when you start replying to people or treating people with the exact same way that they are doing to you, it's funny how they get mad at you for being rude or being a dick. And you're like, so, like, there are times in an email where, like, that happens, and I'll do something similar to you, or I'm like, oh, it was really great that you got back to me. I guess we're just not doing this. Okay, I'll go fuck off now. And then someone's like, well, that's not a polite way to do it. I'm like, you have kind of been standoffish and weird in this discourse of me simply going, I got the email blast, so obviously I've been vetted enough to be on this list of people. So therefore, when I reply back, hey, I'd like to have so-and-so on, let me know if there's availability or if you have any other questions. And then if you follow back with a, hey, let me know your stats, your metrics, da-da-da-da-da-da, and I go through and find all this information that you asked for, and I send it to you, and then you just don't reply, that's kind of fucking rude. Like, at least just be like, hey, we're sorry, like, there's only a limited amount of time, we're only looking to do certain, like, anything would be better than just
I love excuses more
having a discourse. Yeah, no, exactly. And like the thing to me is like, you know, there was, and this goes to sort of, I guess, the just having integrity of some sort. There was, actually, I guess it goes more to the point where if you fuck with my wife or like are rude to my friends, like I will be a huge prick back to you. But there was famously, like, I was doing an interview with Josh from Buckcherry, and they were here in town. And then I got done. My wife and some friends came because the show wasn't selling well, so we got offered a shitload of tickets. And then the opening band had just done Shiprocked, and like my friend was always on Shiprocked, has been going since it exists. And they were talking to this band, and this band was like, oh yeah, we remember you. And then just kind of were blowing them and my wife off. And then at one point, my friend was like, hey, this is my friend John. Like, he has a podcast. You guys should be on it. And they're like, oh yeah. Yeah, maybe. And just like, and granted, this is in like a, probably a 1,500 cap room that maybe had 400 people in it. So it's not like anyone was really beating down their fucking merch booth to like hang out with them or talk to them. And so at one point, like one of the guys was just like my friend was like, oh, she was just like, he was just talking to Josh from Buckcherry for the show he's had on da-da-da-da-da. And then I noticed like one of the guys pull up his phone and start looking at the show real quick, and then kind of like elbow nudge someone else, and just as he's scrolling through, and then all of a sudden like the attitude changed, and they're like, oh wait, what was the name of the show again? Oh yeah, like I think I've heard of that. And I was like, no, we're good, man. I'm good. I don't. And the person was like, no. And I was like, well, first of all, I didn't. And like, they were like, why are you changing your mood? And I was like, well, first of all, I never fucking invited you on the show. I don't give a fuck about. And I literally was like, I don't give a fuck about you guys. I was like, first and foremost, how about we do this? And I go, you were really rude to my friend who is a fan of yours, knew you guys, and actually came to hang out with you when literally no one else cares. No, there's literally no one here to talk to you. Secondly, you're rude to my wife. So that really pisses me off. And I go, third, it wasn't until you saw the laundry list of names I've had on where all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, we want to fuck with you now. And I was like, I'm good. I don't want that. Yeah. And then I remember the publicist reached out to me because they had a new record or something coming out, and I go, no. And this is someone that I deal with every day, and I pretty much never turn down something when they're like, hey, we'd really love to have these people on your show. And my wife was like, you should reach back out and explain why. Because, like, that's just not who you are. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's petty and it doesn't fucking matter. And she was like, but wouldn't you want to know, like, as a boss and having had employees, wouldn't you like to know why maybe what your employees are doing that's maybe causing a detriment to your business? And I was like, yeah, I guess. So then I followed up the email and I was like, hey, here's why I didn't want to have them on. And basically relayed the same story. They're like, publicist is like, that's so unlike them. And maybe you just caught him on a bad day. I was like, I totally understand that. And I was like, but if you're rude to my friends and my wife to my face, I don't really, you've already just gone past the point of return. Like, I'm just not going to fuck with you at that point.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you're willing to do that and you don't know who I am, how often do you do that shit? Because to me, that spoke more volumes to who they are actually versus who they are when they know people are watching.
Yeah, and do you really want to have a conversation and sit there with someone that you know what I mean?
So first question
That's
right out the gate: Why are you shitty to your women fans? Why is that a big deal?
That's what you should do. Have them on and then just talk to them about the situation and just call a spade a spade. But that's not you. I mean, that's the right thing. Look, I get there's circumstances to everything, and emails are hard too. With it, of you never know what people are going through or whatever. So I know you're just talking, but I was like, I would never tell them. When I do reply to those passive aggressive ones, I try to do it in a funny way, and I always write in all seriousness, and because I do know it is a business, but I'm not one to play the game that much. Where I'm like, hey, we're all humans, dude. If something's kind of shitty, I'm gonna let you know I kind of think it's shitty, but I get it, So I mean, Johnny, I feel bad too when we get. I mean, you probably are on the same email threads we are with all these publicity things, and when people reach out directly, and there's just maybe someone that doesn't vibe or time wise, it's like, yeah, I would have it if we had less, but we got some now, and it's going to be harder to squeeze us in. I always feel bad because people help us, but it also shitty when you're like, hey man, I had like 5 of your lowbrow people hoping they're going to get this other one, and then when are you going to give me this big fish? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
but
what
I feel like but
what has been, because I feel like you guys have all done a pretty good job of traversing a lot of your interests. Like we were saying earlier, comedians, some actors, wrestlers, musicians, and so forth. Do you, and to put it in perspective, when I started the show, I had like a goal. Like I had a goal for like the first year I started the show. I had a goal all the way out to 5 years. I pretty much crushed all of my goals within the first full year. And then I never really, and probably bad on my part, I never really re-established and set new goals. I probably should. But do you still have anyone from maybe your original bucket list of like when you started the show, like we would love to get blank? Or
Yes.
have you already gotten most of them?
Personally, it's never. It's okay. Is a double answer. So a lot of the guests, since I booked them, are probably like, especially comedians. John likes comedians, but he doesn't know a lot. So a lot of them, he's like, who did you book? Okay. And it was a lot in the beginning because of like, well, if I'm doing all the legwork, I'm going to get the people that I want to hear from. And I feel like for a while there, I was feeling like a blind date where like, I'm going to put these 2 people together and hopefully they get along. But I do have to be better at, and I do it sometimes where I'm like, hey, I don't think this person would vibe with Johnny's personality, or I know he's just not interested in that. So, but I know the ones that are so my bucket, where I'm going with this is the bucket list is more of ones that I'd want Johnny to talk to or that he wants to talk to, because it's not my show. Like, well, we're all part of it. Ultimately, it is his show. I fully understand that. And I do feel really good when I get guests that I know and I can surprise him with, guess who I got, and he gets stoked and things like that. But Matt Freeman from Rancid is his all-time favorite bassist. That is a bucket list. We've had Lars on, but I've talked to several people like they're like, Matt does not like press. He doesn't like to talk. He might come on with someone else, but he just doesn't like to do that thing. And so I've tried multiple different ways, direct, all these things, and nothing. I do feel like eventually we'll get him. But yeah, so that's definitely a bucket list. The other one Johnny really wants is Ric Flair, but Ric Flair doesn't do anything without paying, so we're not going to pay. So
you know what though? I was surprised when I ran into him outside of the Falcons game when I went to Atlanta a handful of years ago. I was shocked that he actually took a photo with me and wasn't like a.
He didn't charge you $200? Yeah.
Nope.
No. I think he's good. I think it depends on the setting, right? I mean, if you're in passing, it's one thing, but if you're at like a Comic-Con or a wrestling event, I don't think he's going to do it. We were backstage and Rick was at the AEW thing. I don't even think Johnny went up and talked to him. He was waiting for Darby to introduce him, and I'm just like, go up and talk. So there's no drinking backstage at AEW, and I asked. I don't think they don't provide it, but it's not like you can drink, but they're not going to give it to you kind of thing. It's not like a rock backstage.
Right.
So Johnny's getting a drink and he goes and gets it. And like him and Brandon are like the only ones having drinks backstage. But Rick, I guess, walked by John and pointed. He's like, like that looks good. Because Rick's a drinker. So after all the match is over, we're backstage and Rick comes and he sits like right in front of me where I'm at. I said, "Where's the drinks, Rick?" And then he just mumbles to himself. He's like, "In my car." so because they weren't there, so I guess I don't know if he had his own stash or it's for the after party, but I just thought it was funny. But those are the two bucket lists I can think of. I want Bert Kreischer really bad on the show.
I sent him a DM because I'm going to see him tomorrow.
Oh, are you?
Sorry,
oh, yeah.
Going to see him on Thursday.
Hopefully, do you know who's opening for him?
I have no clue. See, the thing that sucks too for me is it's a friend of ours' birthday that day, so we're doing dinner, and then my friend and I are fucking off and then going to Bert. But she was like, "Yeah, we'll just get there before Bert goes on." I'm like, "Okay."
No, dude, he has so many.
So
like
I'm
Shane
like,
Gillis opens for him. All these big names. Like it kills.
I know.
He actually,
I'm partially like. It seems like a perfect vehicle for him to come on your show easily.
So
and he's a star fucker, so it seems like he would definitely want to be on your show.
Yeah, but it's the basis. It's the basis, not the singer of Avenged Sevenfold, so it's a little different.
So,
but
Matt just sits on the couch, like in the cuck chair.
Yeah. So actually, his management is really nice. He was in Anaheim the other day, and I reached out asking, and the management got back and they said, "Hey, sorry, not at this time. It's just too crazy, but maybe down the road." And then he came back. Their management came back with actually someone else. And I always feel like that's a good respect of like, hey, I can't give you this person right now, but it's a peace offering of like, hey, I do have this one, So, and we're gonna have the other guy on. I just got to get Johnny's back on tour, so we banked a bunch of
he'll be
episodes.
here next week.
Is he?
As I'm going to record, Johnny will be here next Monday.
Well, are you going to go? Do you want to go?
I would like to go. I've actually never seen Avenged.
All right.
I've always been broke every time they come through, and they don't tour here in Grand Rapids that often. I think the last time they did was that Kill Switch run that they did, like back in probably like 16 or 17.
Well, the good thing about where you live, it's not like LA or New York. So anywhere that is not major like hotspots, bands don't know people everywhere. You know what I mean? As long as it's not a hometown show, it's like it's a lot easier to get tickets. So you're in like the sweet spot of not a bunch of industry
yes, but
people.
I'm also in that not sweet spot of where like I was saying earlier, I'm terrible at fucking asking for things because I'm like, I don't want people to think that's like I genuinely think that like if I ask for something like I texted a friend of mine the other day that their show that they're playing, their reunion show they're playing here in town was about to sell out. It just sold out today, and I was like, hey, I'm not saying this because of how it's gonna sound, but I'm just genuinely asking, do you still have my wife and I for the show? Because if not, I'm gonna buy tickets before they sell out, and I have no option. And he was like, no, you're good. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, were you really going to buy tickets? I was like, if you said no, then absolutely I was. Like, I'm not above buying tickets. You said you had me, so I was banking on that, but I saw the tickets were getting low, so I didn't want to get left in, because I've already made plans that is the thing we're going to. So I didn't want to be like, yeah, we're good. And then the day of, you're like, oh, fuck, dude, I'm sorry. And be like, Oh shit. Okay.
Oh, no, but I feel like that's a good respect thing. Johnny and I do it all the time. So like I make these toys. I went to go see Rick Glassman, a comedian that I love. I've made action figures. He promotes me on his podcast. It's really cool. We'd never actually met. But I was like, hey, you're coming to town. And I bought tickets because I didn't even ask because like I just didn't want to be that guy, kind of like you said. And then when I showed up, he was like, "Why didn't you just tell me? Like, I'll get you tickets whenever you want to come." Like, and I was like, "Yeah, but I don't want to be that guy." But now I know I have that relationship. But Johnny and I do that all the time. Of like, "Hey, we're buying tickets." And it's that weird question of like, "Hey, I'm going to get these tickets. Are you going to be around?" And then you see if they go, "Oh, I got you," or not. But Johnny's like, it's funny with him because I'm like, if they were to ask you, you would just give them, like, you know how this goes. Like anyone's like, oh yeah, no problem, come on, But it is a respect thing. You don't want to assume, so. But
well, another thing too is like for me, it's like I've had Johnny on, and I still think like speaking of clips from earlier, that was one of my things that when it happened, I was like, I'm clipping that and I'm posting it because I was talking about going to a strip club with my wife because like we always go to strip clubs whenever we travel, and he goes, oh. Went to strip club with your wife? And I go, yeah, we go all the time. He goes, good man, continue.
Yeah.
And it just was so funny that that was the part of the story he wanted to make sure. He was like, wait, go to strip club with your wife? And I go, yeah. And he goes, awesome, continue. Like, I don't know, it just really made me laugh because it's like, out of all the parts of the story that you could have been like, hold on, pause, let's circle back. It was the with your wife? Yes. Okay, cool.
Oh no, that sounds very much him.
Yeah.
that would be what he was stoked on. But
it's a thing to me where it's like I had fun talking to him. It's funny because like I'll sort of bust balls in the comments on Instagram because like I can see the bottles I sent him still sitting on the shelf. So like whenever I see like Brandon when he was on took like a video of like the bar. So then I tag the companies of the shit I sent because I'm like, hey, at the very least, maybe one of these fucking companies will be like, hey, yeah, you got it to a guy from an event. Do you want some free shit? I'll be like, yes, I do. Please.
Yeah, right.
I drink your product all the fucking time, so please.
Which one was it?
It is. I sent him the barrel finished gin from. It probably still Eastern Kill, the bottle I sent. They recently changed their name to, or Gray Skies. You might have gotten the bottle that was still Gray Skies before they became Eastern Kill. And then the other one is the Traverse City Cherry Whiskey. So if you're looking at Johnny's Bar, and yes, I actually remember.
It's on the right.
If you look on the right, on the left-hand side, that's where the gin is. It's on like the first shelf. It's a clear bottle with like almost typography on it. And like a kind of greenish label, and then on the right hand side is where the cherry whiskey is. It's on like the bottom.
I know where the cherry whiskey
right-hand
is.
Side. Yeah, it's so fucking good. Yeah.
I'm such a pussy. I won't drink any of that stuff. He always makes fun of me because I'm like, I've told the story before. One of the coolest things that he thought he was busting my balls with, and I'm like, joke's on you. I went up north for Aftershock. And they were performing, but they were performing the next day, and I wanted to see the band
when
before.
You almost passed out in the pit?
Well, no, that was a more recent. Yeah, I learned how old I was, and old, dad vibes was playing Limp Bizkit, and basically I lived it and almost passed out. Yeah, that was. No, they were playing, and he was with my wife and all of our group of friends the night before, and they were busting my balls because I like Mike's Hard Lemonade. And he goes, "Oh, you know what? I want to get watch this. I'm going to get on my rider a bucket of Mike's Hard Lemonade to make fun of Sam." So I go and I get there, and he goes, "Come here, I got something for you." And we go out of his dressing room, and right in the middle is this bucket that says for Sam, and it's all these Mike Hard Lemonade. And I'm just like, thanks, man. Joke's on you. They don't serve this here. So now I got free Mike's Hard Lemonade and I get to go. And so I felt that was a pretty cool being a part of Avenged Sevenfold's writer, so that was cool.
So I have a weird thing. Are you big into, like, is that your kind of more your vibe, like seltzers and stuff like that?
I don't drink seltzers, but I like sweet stuff. So like Bailey's and all that, but go ahead. Oh, perfect. What is that?
So this is called Long Drink. It is, and this is the peach flavor. It just came out probably about 4 or 5 months ago. Okay. The thing is, though, so Miles Teller, I don't know if you know who that is. Miles Teller's an actor. He was Goose's kid in the new Top Gun.
Oh yeah. He's the Footloose guy and all that.
Yeah. So
the remake of Footloose.
I think so he, I believe, is the co-owner of this. And it is a company that exists out in Finland for real. Like this has been over there for the longest time. And so there's a couple of bars here in town, one of which the main bar manager, whenever I'm around, he's like there will be legit reps who are like, okay, so we got this and try this and da-da-da-da. And I can't tell you how many times that dude will be like, what do you think of that? And I'm like, this sucks. This is pretty good. This is all right. And like when Long Drink came out, it was shortly after High Noons had just come out, like probably within half a year. And so I was like, and the thing with High Noons, almost all the RTD ready to drink, cocktails basically were vodka, tequila. Like those were the two flavors that everything was. So Long Drink is a gin based drink, and they came out with a regular and then what was the other one? I think Cranberry, was the other one. Cranberry sucked. I wasn't a fan. Then they came out with a sugar-free, though. And at the time, I had told my friend, I was like, this is a great alternative to High Noon and to White Claw. It's better flavor. It tastes better. It's not as much, like, if you don't necessarily want one, because at the time they didn't have the sugar-free, I was like, it's a great alternative. I think the price point at the time, I think was like $4 something when it first came out. I was like, I think it's a great alternative as a whole. I think a bunch of like girls are going to really like this, especially if you like gin, which I do. And so fast forward, I had found that Founders, which is from here, the beer company here in Grand Rapids, dumped like $1 million into this company. So like locally, they're pretty big. And I knew that they weren't going to go away. So it became this thing where, I'd really been pushing this for a while. And then they came out with a peach flavor, teased it, put it in a variety pack where you'd only get 2, but you'd have to buy the pack of everything else as a proof of concept, and then finally came out with like these on their own. And is a thing where like I fucking love these. These are like my go-to drinks. Clearly, I just pulled some out of my fridge.
Are they like seltzers? What are they like?
It's basically like a
Are they
gin.
Carbonated?
Yes. Yep. They're carbonated. This one is not sugar-free. Apparently, that might be a thing soon. We just went to a party where Miles Teller was, and I actually posted a video of me and my friend that I do the other show with, ripping a shot of Fernet with Miles Teller.
Is he live there? Is that why it's all?
No, he was here on a promotional tour. He was here on a promotional tour. But the thing is as I found out through befriending the reps of Long Drink, that essentially Michigan as a whole does like 4 to 5 times, especially Grand Rapids, does like 4 to 5 times what everyone else does, like in the rest of the country. So we fucking kill it on this thing, and it's been like my go-to thing that I kind of push on people where I'm like, fucking try this. I will say the peach is because it's not sugar-free, and I have more of a palate of sugar-free things now, that like I can drink about 2 of these, and I'm like, I'm a little done on this. But the sugar-free of just the regular flavor, I'll fucking crush those all day long. And what's funny is a lot of people would give me shit, and they're like, you're fucking drinking a Long Drink? And I go, for every one of these you see me drink, I've had at least 1 shot of whiskey for every single one. So you can call me a bitch all you want, but I'm also, this is my social drink. My drinking is, I've already done.
I'm just,
but I was going to say,
a complete bitch.
But I was going to say, if you like sweet things and kind of are more into like the seltzers and all that kind of stuff, and it can be arranged, what I can try to do is slip a 6-pack or so of these to have Johnny bring back to you.
Well, I don't know. He's going overseas. I won't see him for a while. He's staying over there, and I will
then
look
I can do
that
the same
up.
Thing I did with the bottle. I don't think it's available in California yet.
If I go through Beverage and More, they do out-of-state stuff.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a big drinker, so
I was going to say, here's the other thing. Well, shit, I can get this anywhere. But I was going to say the thing that gets like kind of interesting to me about it is Michigan is one of those states where I can't, like, all those websites like Drizzly and all that kind of stuff, I can't use those because they don't ship to Michigan.
But yet
so
they're such a big. That's so weird that they sell so much. But interesting.
I know it sucks.
I'm such a pussy that you would do that. John, Brandon, we have a drinks with Johnny. We did a IPA and then a seltzer, and Brandon did the label for. He goes, "Can you guys send this to me?" And I'm like, and I just went quiet, and John's like, "Yeah," and then he never did. And then Brandon's like, "Hey, can you send this to me? Can you?" And I was like, I finally was like, dude, I am too big of a wuss to send alcohol across I'm like such a rule follower, man. Like, I'm like, no, I'll pass it to you when you're here and you can ship it to yourself. I'll save you one, but yeah. So,
dude, I literally, so a handful of years ago, I was looking at doing, during the pandemic, actually, I was doing, Run the Jewels put out a quote unquote tour of beers. And so I had decided to try to collect them all because I was like, whatever, like the pandemic's here, can't see anybody, touring isn't a thing. So let me kind of have like a thing to do and work toward. Excuse me. And so I ended up deciding to try to buy all of them. There was 13 breweries.
But just with
beers.
different breweries, or what do you mean a tour? What
Across
do you mean
the world?
by that?
Yep. So they would
Okay.
kind of show you. Hold on just a second. So what they ended up
Looking at
doing
your
was
posters
around
while
the
you walked
time.
away.
Yeah, sorry. So what they
No,
ended
it's all
up
good.
doing was, remember the game Cyberpunk that just came out a while ago? I don't know if you're into
I
video
saw
games.
it, but I haven't played it. No.
Okay, I still have an unopened copy that was like I bought for $4 because I heard it was a shit game, and I was like, for $4, I'll check it out. Still haven't opened it.
Yeah.
But Run the Jewels did the song for that game, and it was called No Save Point was the song. So they released a beer, and what they were doing was a No Save Point beer where they went to a brewery, and they would go, hey, we're gonna do a lager, we'll say, and they would give them like the base recipe of the lager, and then would leave everything up to the brewery to make their own version of No Save Point. So I was able to buy so many. I think I got 7 or 8 out of the 12, and even some from overseas. So, like, where is this one from? Who did this one? Weathered Soul. So this is from San Antonio, Texas. So I got this from Mark from Nothing More because he lives out there. So he got those from me.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, this one is from, I think this is from over in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. United Kingdom. This is from London. So I found a way to get it. This one was from, where the fuck is this from? Brillo. So I think this was one of the ones that was over in, like, London, or this is Berlin. So, like, I have a bunch of shit from overseas that, like, technically, there's no way I should have this. But I knew enough people that would send me canned seltzers or pops or whatever under the guise. And then, speaking of projects and weird things and how, like, it's funny doing some of this shit. So, at one point, my friend and I were like, let's do, like, a mini documentary of, like, you know, at a time where the world is separated by a pandemic and you can't interact with anyone, you know, Run the Jewels is getting together to bridge the gaps between beer lovers, music fans, and, like, collectors and video game people and all this kind of stuff. And, like, how cool that is. And I was like, maybe we reach out to all the different breweries and try to do a quick interview with them. Like, how did you come up with your beer? How did Run the Jewels get in contact with you? Like, what was the process of you, like, getting, like, having them reach out to you? And so I started reaching out to all the different breweries. A handful of them are like, fuck it, let's do it. I had one that I did and I actually posted, like, a while ago, like, when I was taking a hiatus. I was like, here's the quick 10-15 minute conversation I had with these guys from this brewery. But it got to a point, I think I was reaching out to the company from Mexico. I think they were in Jalisco, or however you say it. And someone's like, well, have you talked to anyone from the Run the Jewels camp? And I was like, no. What I want to do is I want to create a sizzle reel, kind of proof of concept it, and then maybe not with this one, but if they ever do, like, another beer collab, maybe they'll go, hey, that was really cool. Let's get you involved now and start the process, so when we come out with everything, we can roll out with this thing. And before I could even say, like, no, I haven't reached out to them, we're trying to do this on our own just to prove that we can do it and we don't need them, and just, you know, we're taking ownership of this idea. And it turned into Run the Jewels management reaching out to me going, hey, so we were informed of this thing you're trying to do. What is the scope of what is the scope of the reach you're hoping to get? Do you have any background in any of this? And what is your ultimate goal with the project? And so like I sent a very long professional email that was just like, I come from the podcasting world. I've been doing it for X amount of time. Here's links to this. The friend that I want to do this with has recently put out a feature-length documentary on the history of pipe making for like smoking tobacco. So between the two of us, we think that we obviously have a good handle on what we think this should look like. And then the other thing is one of the breweries here in town, one of which that we're friends with the owner, got to do a beer in this run. And that was sort of the impetus for the thing. And so we're going to hopefully, like I've already done a couple of interviews with these people. We're going to do one with the person that runs this brewery here. And then we're all going to film us tasting all the other beers all at once. So we get to taste all of the beers and compare them to one another. And then, you know, if someone from Run the Jewels wants to get involved and just kind of explain like, how did we pick this beer? Like basically I would flip the two questions I had, which is how did Run the Jewels get involved? How did you decide what your beer was going to be based on the base recipe? Mine was going to be, how did you pick the breweries? How did you decide this was going to be the base beer you wanted? And then it just is what it is. I never got a reply back from the management, whether saying like you can continue or don't continue with the project. But because half of the breweries at that point were like, we're not going to do anything if we don't get permission from Run the Jewels, because they all had to sign NDAs. And I know what those NDAs included, and it had nothing to do with what we were looking to do. So it was just kind of a thing where I was like, had I not done this show, I don't think I would have had the idea to be like, fuck it, I'm just going to try to do this idea that I've never done in my life. I've never made a documentary. I've never made a thing like that. But by doing this and all the people I've been able to reach out to and talk to, it's like, what's the worst they're going to do? Tell me no? But the fact that it got to the fact that it got to Run the Jewels, like the fact that someone in the Run the Jewels camp knows that we were doing this thing, blows my fucking mind.
Right.
Blows my mind.
It's such a small world, and it's the secret of life, right? Of anything is due, and the further you get into things and you meet owners of companies or famous people or whatever, of just everything when you're younger seems untouchable, and then you get old enough to like do it yourself, and it's like all it is people just didn't take no for an answer or took the extra step or the initiative of trying. Like the answer, my dad always said, like the answer is always no if you don't ask, and
100%.
I totally believe that, and honestly, like Fred Armisen, like, hey man, I didn't think when I was watching Saturday Night Live that I'd be seeing this. The whole reason I started with Johnny, if you've listened to the podcast, you might know this. It's just like we were just friends, and I saw he was doing drinks with Johnny. It was just friends doing stuff, and I saw Jake the Snake was coming to town, and I said, hey, what if I got Jake the Snake come on your podcast? And he's like, go for it. Like, what are you going to do, guy who isn't in the industry or know anything? And I was just like, well, I have a good way of talking. I can figure it out. And I got him on the show. And then after that, he's like, hey, do you want to get more people? And I was like, yeah. So to your point, it's just like, if you want to do something, set your mind to it to do it. I mean, while that didn't go through, it's pretty rad that you got that far, and it wouldn't even gotten that far if you didn't even try. You know what I mean? Now they know that you were doing something, you know, and that might, and down the road, that might spur to something else of like, hey, you were doing this, we're doing this, now we're ready for it. And if you don't put yourself out there, the answer is always no. So
do you find that this might be a really ass backwards way of getting to this question, but you know, as someone who doesn't have kids, and someone pointed this out a while ago, they're like, for someone who doesn't want kids and doesn't have them, you ask a lot of people who have kids about kids. And I was like, yeah, but I think it's just because I don't want them doesn't mean that I don't.
Do you hear mine? Is that why?
No, I don't. But I was going to say, like, just because I don't have them or don't want them doesn't mean that I don't appreciate thinking about how kids see the world and how having a kid changes your perspective on things. So the question I have is, through doing this podcast and kind of correlating to what we just said of having things where you'll just try and crazy shit happens as a result of just literally asking, have you found that maybe the podcast has made you more informed to kind of give that, I don't want to say permission, but to tell your kid that is a thing, that anything is possible if you just stick to it and all that kind of stuff? Like, is because there's a manifestation of being able to see it in real time with the show, even though your kid probably doesn't understand what the podcast is or any of the stuff you do to do it.
Yes. So that's a interesting kind of hard question to answer for me personally, because my goal to them is like, I you don't know till you have kids. And to me, just so you know, like my kids are I'm more of a family guy than anything. Like that's like my kids. The only thing I was really bummed about not doing that Sting thing is that was like one of the first times my kids were like, "What? That's awesome!" Like usually I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna have this person," and they're like, "Oh, that's cool," and my daughter will be like, your podcast only has 40,000 followers. That's shit. Mr. Beast has 50 million or 100 million. I'm like, dude, it's completely different. Like, you have no idea the work to get to here. But it's just funny that she. What was the question again? So the guests, I try to teach them to do whatever they want to go out and do it. But as a parent, it's a fine line to teach them, like with adults, right? So I think about the teachers. Like, if I knew when I was a kid that just because this person's in a certain position doesn't necessarily mean they know shit. They could have just been in the right place, the right time, or it's not even that they're good at their job. It's just like life happens, and you just have to take opportunities.
What Clerks. You say? Title does not dictate behavior.
Right? I forgot that they even said that, but that's 100% real. But it's a fine line where I'm like, if I knew that my teacher was a fucking idiot and I called her on her shit, that's just disrespectful. But in reality, I'm like, you are kind of being stupid, you know? So like, for example, so to me, wait, not example, but like, it's one of those things where I try to teach my kids, like, I want them to know just because people are adult doesn't mean that it's right or wrong and they have to do that. But at the same time, they have to have a respect for people. Because I do think that some kids that unlock that early in life because they might not have a parent that like gives a shit and they just can run the streets, do whatever they want. I feel like they unlock that earlier, but then they just become assholes. Like then there's a thing of like, look, I don't have to do whatever you tell me, but like there is a conformity to society as well as that. So I do. It's hard because we've been friends with John for so long, Johnny. And so my kids have gotten to do some really cool things. My daughter kind of gets it. My son, though, we went to Ghost Inside, and he was going because we got hooked up with tickets and stuff like that, and then John's band and all these things, and wrestling. We're backstage. We get to meet all these wrestlers. So I asked my son the other day if he want to go to a concert, and he goes, well, are we getting VIP backstage? And I said, no. He goes, nah, I'm good then. And I'm like, you little prick. You have no idea. Like, no, when I was a kid, that wasn't what I got. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like in the rafters watching, being like, yes, I'm just stoked to be here. But I mean, they don't know any better, So I get it. But it's a fine line, back to your question, of teaching them that anything is doable if you go out there. But also, you got to do it the right way. You just can't, assume that you're going to get everything, because I mean, everything. And my kids look at YouTube. It's very weird. Of like every kid wants to be a YouTuber now. It's like, yeah, but they think it's easy. But do you know how many YouTubers there are? And the fact that these ones got hit. I mean, just like podcasting, like there's a million podcasts that start and then fall off and things like that. Everything sounds great in theory until you're actually doing it. And there's plenty of people who got lucky. They got some viral video and they're popular, just like people write a song that hits. And then other people are great musicians that never hit at all, So I try to keep them grounded. Like my daughter didn't have a phone until she was 12, all our other friends had them. But it's really hard, and you never know what's right. I appreciate you asking the question about being a parent, but like you never know what's right. I always say you just give them everything you can, and then hope that you did it right, because they're going to take whatever they want, So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does. But I think the thing for me is it's almost like reverse engineering the question, because to a degree, like something I've kind of wrestled with over the years is like thinking about how, as I've gotten older, I look at my parents as people. Like I now realize I'm like, oh, you are people, you're individuals, you have your own thoughts and opinions, and now that I'm almost 40, it's like I don't have to kowtow to anything. Like if you're like, this is this, it's like, no, I don't agree with that. And I don't have to like be like, okay, well, because you're my dad, or my mom or my parents, I have to agree with you. It's like, no, I don't have to do that anymore. Like, but the thing is it also has kind of changed how I kind of view how I've grown up, because it's like, okay, man, my parents had me when I was 20. They were 24. You know, the world was different in mid 80s at that point. My parents had a child born with like, I had facial birth defects with a cleft lip and palate and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, they're kind of thrust into this shit of just like, I don't know what any of this is or how to deal with it, and you think, and I do, where I'll think back to being like, well, where was I when I was 24? Probably not ready to deal with that kind of shit. However, I understand that, and like anything in life, you probably just figure it out and do the best you can and move forward. But like how you were talking about like calling out a teacher for being full of shit, sometimes I feel like it's like, oh man, you probably could do that with your parents, because you're like, how the fuck did you, like, if I asked you some, like, like a Cat Williams joke, he's like, when my son was born, all I wanted him to do was talk to me, and then when he did, I didn't know he'd be certified to ask every fucking goddamn question under the sun. Like, Daddy, what's barbecue sauce? Is barbecue sauce tangy and sweet? Daddy, what's the difference between tangy and sweet? Is tangy sweet? And then he's just like, I don't fucking know shit, stop asking me. And it just becomes this thing where it's like, when you think about things like that, you're just like, oh fuck, man, like, my parents were basically kids just figuring it out and had to figure it out quick. And so when you kind of look at, that relationship through that new prism that you're able to see it through, it just kind of gets interesting to think about a parent to a child relationship. And then also, like, I'm looking at it more like as the kid looking at my parents, but I also wonder now, like, what did having me change for them? What does having a child change? Because I feel like there's something so innocent about kids, with the way that they think, and don't have, like, I don't want to say lies, but it's like they have no filter. They don't know to lie. They don't know to not say the thing that they're thinking. They just say things.
They also have a skewed
and it's
reality too, on top of that.
Sure.
So
it just becomes this thing where it's like when you see that as the adult, the authoritative figure, does that unlock something in you where you're like, man, I don't think I've been that blatantly honest about things. I haven't had this sense of wonderment or this idea of fantasy or all these things that children do and are. I don't have that anymore. I haven't had it in a while. And maybe it kind of unlocks those things back in you to be like, it's maybe something that you're jaded about. You go do it with your kids and you're like, oh man, this is fucking rad. And it
I'm age developed.
Bubbles.
I feel like obviously I make action figures. I grew up with a dad. He died when I was 19. So but our parents were a different generation. So I'm 42. I'm a little older than you. But I mean, I would put our parents kind of in the same. Our parents, I don't know what yours were like. They didn't get on the ground and play with us. Did yours do that, or were they like they did?
Well, I was going to say, my dad worked second shift at a factory, so it was a lot of my mom and I. And like one of my earliest memories is my mom and I watching Dirty Dancing all the fucking time. And at the end scene when Patrick Swayze catches baby, I would always want to do that, but I would hop off the table and my mom would catch me. So I always had memories of watching Dirty Dancing and doing the end dancing, and I always want to be like, I want to catch you, and she's like, you can't.
Yeah. That's awesome. But with that, like that is a good moment. But like my dad was always there for me. So my dad was the reason why I'm into toys. And if you got to go, I mean, I've just been talking.
No,
here.
I'm good.
So I grew up with a dad. My parents got divorced when I was like 2 months old. He wanted split custody. So he had to find a job where he didn't have to work 9 to 5. So he found, he sold these little Matchbox cars. They're called models of yesteryear. And at that time in the 80s, they were worth a ton. So he became what he called a toy broker. I don't know. He might have been a drug dealer and put it as a front as a toy broker. I don't know what the deal is, but he would sell these toys internationally. So we'd have people from like Australia come and stay with us, and he had this insane collection, and then he would buy them or broker stuff. But the cool thing about that is he would take me to toy shows. So I got to, while he's doing business, he'd be like, here's some money, go buy whatever you want. And they had like every G.I. Joe and all these different things and all the toys. So toys were always my thing. And while my dad never like played, he encouraged it. Like I kept all of my toys. I was a spoiled little shit. I kept all my toys till I was in college, and then I sold them all for beer money. But now I'm kicking myself like, fuck, I wish I would have kept all that stuff. So my dad was there, but I don't remember him like, hey, let's play guys together and let's do that. And I do feel like this generation of parents are a lot more involved in their kids than previously. And my kids talk to me, dude, my dad would hit me, like slap me and stuff like that. So like he loved me, but it was like, I mean, it was different. I don't hit my kids. The shit to my kids. It's like one time my son like ran off like saying stuff, and I just turned around and I'm like, dude, if I were to say that to my dad, I would have gotten shit beat out of me. And she's like, just let him air it out, let him vent. And I'm just like, dude, I wasn't allowed to vent. Like, it's like, no, you go, you shut your mouth because I told you to. But I mean, it's a different generation. But at the same time, I do feel like I have a more open relationship with my kids where they would feel more comfortable coming to talk to me about stuff. And again, that just circles back with, you do everything you can. You hope you get it right. I always make the joke, that's not a joke, that I just hope that my daughter goes to 18 without having any nudie pictures, because kids today just don't even understand that things last on the internet forever. I mean, I joke, but I'm not joking. It's just like, even from like a friend's like, hey, don't talk shit about that person to your friend, because they can just screenshot that and send it to the other. Like the repercussions, because it's so normal, instant, they don't understand. Yeah. So, but as far as being a kid, I am the biggest kid, and my wife she's an adventurer and things like that. She doesn't have any hobbies, but she likes to do stuff. So, I will say, maybe unlike others, we are very arrested development over here, where we're a bunch of kids. So,
where you finish each other's sandwiches.
Yeah, but yeah, I know every word to that. Like, I remember my daughter was younger, and I knew every word to Frozen, and yeah, no, and it's funny too, because I try to bring in new stuff, but my daughter listens to Eminem. Her favorite artist is Eminem. She's 12 years old, and it's just like, and then she's dressing like it's 1992 of all baggy stuff, and it's just so insane how everything comes from full circle. But I was thinking too, what do you think about this? That they're listening to stuff from the 90s, which is like when we were younger listening to something from the 70s. So it's almost like hippie music. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like time period wise, like, but I don't feel like the vibe is the same from when we were younger listening to 70s, right? Because I don't think music.
No. A
lot of these artists are still around, relevant. Unlike the 70s, people were still around, but kind of past their prime, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because like I often think about how growing up when I did, because it's like obviously my parents were pretty big into music, my dad being a musician and all that kind of stuff, where it's like, okay, I have, like today I was listening to Rod Stewart because I was like, oh, I really want to hear like this song, but it was like off of like
what Rod song was it? What did you want to hear?
I wanted to hear The Killing of Georgie Part 1 and 2. Okay,
I like it.
And then that led me into Young Turks, then led me into Every Picture Tells a Story. Then I just ended up listening to the Unplugged album because that took me back to driving in the car with my mom. And like I still remember all the fucking jokes. Like when he gets ready to cut into, I think it was Every Picture Tells a Story, and Ron Wood comes out and he goes, I wrote this song, my wife wasn't even born.
Yeah, I totally remember that. My parents love that album. I've heard that so many times.
And so
hey,
it's
Mr.
funny,
DJ,
like,
when they play that song,
yep, yeah. And then it's like, so listening to that, like I went on that route, and then from there, I think I went to like, it was just someone then I went into some Bryan Adams, because like I was supposed to see Bryan Adams like a couple of weeks ago, but they canceled the week of the tour that was coming here. Kept everything on either end of it, but just our week was like gone. No reason, no like, hey, it's because he's sick or had other, like nothing. So it was really frustrating, but like I've still been just listening to a ton of Bryan Adams going like, fuck, this dude's got so many hits. This show would have been so
you're going to Sting
awesome.
Next for All for One?
Yeah, I did listen to that song from the Don Juan DeMarco. No, Three Musketeers, the Three Musketeers movie.
No,
Because
it was Three Musketeers.
Don Juan DeMarco,
it feels like Robin.
Don Juan DeMarco,
Right.
Don Juan DeMarco was the Have You Ever Really Loved a Woman? That was that song.
Oh, that's right. That was from that. You're right. Oh,
Yep,
great time
yep.
of music, man.
Well, that's like even listening to How Did This Get Made? And they were shitting on Sting doing the song for Demolition Man.
You listen? I haven't. I don't travel like I used to, which I hate. But that is one of my favorite podcasts. I didn't. You listen to How Did This Get Made?
Oh yeah,
Jason Mantzoukas is the fucking hilarious,
So fucking
most hilarious dude.
yeah.
Dude, speaking of canceled shows, I was texting you when I bought the Busta Rhymes show, and this week I just got a text that they
did it get
canceled
canceled?
it. I'm so bummed, and
Oh,
I try to
shit.
look up why, but I can't find a reason.
Did I send you that Busta Rhymes podcast that I had to have?
I think you maybe told me about it, but I don't think I listened to
Oh,
it,
man.
or you didn't send it.
So
to me.
someone had sent it to me, and I was like, all right, like Busta Rhymes doesn't really do podcasts, so like, and it doesn't seem like it was like a, like, it doesn't seem like it'd be like a No Jumper or something like that, where it's like it has hip hop people on you're used to seeing, or, the fucking show with Cameron and Mace, or God, what's the other fucking dude that wasn't a great rapper, but like, Joe Budden, Joe Budden's podcast. Speaking of people who have like no talent in one thing, but somehow parlay it into a whole career after the fact. But it's a thing where I was expecting it to be that, but it was like more of like kind of like a business forward podcast. And
Which
this
one?
dude, like, just the one that Busta Rhymes was on, is like more
okay.
of like, when you look at some of the other guests, they're like more business, like, Fortune 200, Fortune 100, like companies, and it's, these kind of people. But it was like probably the most honest conversation I've heard, like someone of that stature having on a podcast. Like Busta Rhymes talking about his longtime manager dying and all the shit that, like, getting to the house and all this stuff, and having these health complications, and his son telling him, like, I'm afraid you're gonna die, go to the doctor. And his doctor telling him, like, if he didn't go to the doctor, if he didn't go that day, all the weight he gained, all the shit that he was doing was killing him, and he probably would have died like a day or two later because it was that bad. And like all the challenges of losing the weight and getting back into shape, and getting to a place where he felt back to who he was, because he had lost it all. He basically said, like, I didn't feel like I was the Busta Rhymes. I didn't look like Busta Rhymes anymore. And like just talking about mental health and all of these things. And it's, as a person, as a guy who talks about mental health, as a guy who listens to a ton of podcasts and talks to a lot of other men, I think there's so many things in that podcast where I'm like, this is the kind of conversations more men need to be having in this day and age.
Oh, you sold me.
About how to age. I don't want to say age gracefully, but just to understand when you get older. I think the things that you need to be kind of more focused on versus the things that meant quote unquote everything to you when you were in your 20s. And to me, like, it was a thing, like, there's a couple of parts in the episode, like, where I legitimately was crying, and Busta Rhymes was even crying. And you're just like, fuck, man, I never, like, didn't have that on my Funko Bingo card of, like, who was going to really, like, resonate with me having a real, just honest conversation for an hour plus. And that one was just one where you're just like, man, fuck, this is, like, even if I didn't have a podcast, I'd be like, this is why podcasts are fucking awesome, man. Like, because you wouldn't get this anywhere else. This is only going to happen here, in this moment, with these two people, and it's never going to be duplicated. Like, it's just lightning in a bottle. And to me, like, anytime there's a podcast that's like that, I'm like, oh fuck, this is so fucking good. And selfishly, there have been times where listening to certain shows, I'll be like, this reminds me of something I had a conversation with so-and-so about, and I get to go back and listen to my own conversations with some of these people who I really look up to, and even have that same feeling where I'm like, fuck, I know I'm listening to me talking to this person, but this is a really fucking good conversation. And you know what? I picked out something that either I said that I don't listen to myself sometimes, or this person said something, and fuck, I really needed that right now. I needed that to motivate me for something else, or to reassess something maybe I've been putting off. And to me, like, in as much as music, and I'm sure, Johnny would easily agree with this. Albums and music are a snapshot of where they were in the time of when they were making it. And I think what we're doing these things is it's an audio journal snapshot of where we are currently. And the cool thing is we can go back and go listen to where we were and be like, man, I remember not being in a good place when this episode was happening. I remember being so ecstatic I got this. And you get to kind of relive those emotions again. And that's so crazy to be able to do something like that. And then if you're lucky enough to kind of have people reach out to you to understand what this does for them. And that's the real mindfuck for me, is like people being like, oh my God, I really resonated when you guys talked about this, or you said this, or this thing. And it's like, dude, I just sit in my fucking office looking at a wall or staring at a computer screen. Like, who the fuck am I? But the fact that there is somebody who listens and it does something for them, it's just like, that's why like it's so hard to like quit this sometimes.
No, and even if it's one or two people, I'm very much, I give this to my dad for teaching me that. It's like, and it ties very much into now circling all of what we've talked about of like the keyboard warriors talking shit or whatever. Like I'm the opposite, where if I were to have an episode like that, I will send the thing like, hey, I just want to let you know this part meant something to me, because as a podcaster, you say a lot of stuff and it probably affects people a lot more than you even know, but people aren't always vocal. Johnny's got a son, so he likes the podcast because if, his son can always go back and say, oh, here's this giant catalog of my dad, and I can see exactly how he was as a person and things like that, which is cool in that front. But as far as the helping, people get through things, like, that is one of the coolest thing about having our podcast. And I think you could probably do this too, even talking about the Naughty by Nature of like we met like the $1 Million Man, and growing up as a kid, that is one thing that while my dad didn't play things with me, like we would watch TV or wrestling and things like that. And the $1 Million Man was my dad's favorite. And when I met the $1 Million Man, I just shook his hand. I said, hey, I really appreciate the bond you had, you allowed my father and I to have to watch you every night, and the entertainment you gave. And I got really teary-eyed, and he was a sweetheart of a man and understood it. And I'm sure he's been told that a million times, but he really made me feel like, thank you for that, And even talking to Sting, the other day, I asked him to sign something, and I said, hey, Sting. And it sounds like I'm blowing smoke, but I don't say shit that I don't mean to say.
Sting.
Yeah, well, a funny story about that. So Sting introduced himself.
Hold on just a second.
Yeah, go for it.
One or two things. I have to pee really bad, so either keep talking because
I can let you go, man. It's getting late. But if it's up to you, man.
I just have to pee really quick. But I was gonna say, if you want to keep talking, I can still hear you.
Okay, I'll tell the story. About Sting. So when I had him sign something, he as he was signing, he said, hey, Sting, I just want to let you know, because that day he had his sons come out with him, that it really means a lot to me that you hold fatherhood so, precious and you really value that, because me as a person, I value that. And it was really cool to see you out there with your sons. And he looked me dead in the eye and he goes, that means a lot. Thank you very much. And it is because I'm sure people are like, oh, you've been a great wrestler in 92 when you did this. It was cool. But I don't think many people said that. So that was cool. But anyways, so Sting, Darby is with Sting. I'll put it on a bow and circle back on this. They're friends. They flew out to Johnny's house to use his Cadillac. And if you see any new promos with Sting, there's a black and white one, and he's in a Cadillac. It's Johnny's, who's been in Backcountry and a couple other videos, I think Far Away, of Avenged. So when he came to the house, he introduced himself as Steve, and he wasn't in makeup. So to me, if you tell me your name's Steve, I'm going to call you Steve now on. So I met him backstage like a couple years later, and I said, hey, Steve, good to see you again. And Johnny was just like, you fucking idiot. His name's Sting. Like, show some respect. I'm like, he's a fucking human. Like, people don't go, hello, Johnny Christ, like at your bank. So whatever. We're always busting each other balls. So I'm in the flight going to AEW, and and he's in first class. And just by chance, the line for me to go past him stops, and I go, hey, Steve, good to see you. I go, I'm friends with Johnny from Avenged, and you came out to Orange County. And he looked at me like, you're calling me Steve. Do I know you like personally? And then I said, okay. And I also said, I'm Darby's friend. And I could just see the look on his face like, I feel like I should know you, but I don't know you. And then I said, you came out to Orange County and we did that promo. And he's like, oh, okay, good to see you. So yeah, I'll see you. And I wasn't being a punisher, and I kept moving. But then everybody gives me shit that I call him Steve. But I'm like, he's a fucking human, and he introduced himself as Steve. What do you do? Would you call him Steve, or would you just call him Sting?
I think it would depend on how he introduced himself to me.
Well, I feel like I called him Sting when I saw him backstage because he's in character.
Yeah.
But out of makeup, call him Steve, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I the handful of wrestlers that I've met, like, it's funny, like I said, kind of going back to like wrestling stuff. Did you ever watch Total Divas when that was on?
No, but wasn't the only reason I know about it, I stopped watching when I was a kid, and I didn't get back till AEW, but okay. wasn't what's his name on that? Bobby from Blackcraft. He was, yes. Because he
he was on that.
That's the only reason I know of that show.
So a dude who he's still in a band now called Amorosa, but Bradley Walden used to be in a band that was from Detroit called Squid the Whale. And so I had known Bradley for a while. And at one point, like, I was like, hey, and I know he was big into wrestling, and for a little while he was dating Paige Soraya. And so I was like, hey, are you coming to the house show? Or maybe it was like a SmackDown taping or something. I don't remember which. I feel like it was a house show on a weekend. And so I was like, hey, let's go out and grab drinks or whatever. And what's funny is, like, I just got nothing. Like, it was like as soon as we had planned on at least linking up and like meeting or whatever and hanging out. And then it just was like nothing. Well, fast forward when Total Divas was on, and the night that they were here, him and Paige got into a huge argument. And like, so he was just dealing with that. And I was like, and I remember looking at my wife just going like, well, I guess I know why he didn't reply to my texts.
All right.
But it was just like one of those.
You never know what's happening behind the scenes.
But like, again, like sometimes, like when I tell people like my life is fucking weird. In what situation do you know someone that you're texting and they essentially quote unquote blow you off, and then 4 or 5 months later you're watching a TV show and you're like, oh, that's why you didn't text me.
That's right. Validation.
So when are you guys going to start doing? When are you going to start doing live podcasts? Because I feel like that's the next evolution for the show. It seems like, especially living out in California.
Yeah. I mean, Brandon and I have said it forever. Johnny's hard to pin down of what he wants. He wants to do it, elaborate. So we have talked about, and I think we told you about doing breweries.
Hold on, just a second. I have I'm going to put a pin in that because I have a question I just thought of.
Yeah, do it.
And this isn't. It might sound bad, but I don't mean it to be.
Go for it.
Do you think? So we were just kind of talking to kind of put it into perspective. So we were talking a little bit ago about how, the shows are a certain thing, and not having to like have it be something that it's not. Like trying to figure out who you are, what the show is, and all that kind of stuff. And how numbers maybe aren't as big as people think, or that you're not making as much money. Like we were kind of making all those jokes. Do you think at times having Johnny be a part of the show is sort of a hindrance because and I don't want to say, I'll say the collective you, feel like the show has to be of a certain level because of Johnny's name being attached to it and what he is known for? Like, do you feel like I could go and maybe
it puts a new set of rules.
Yeah. Okay.
No. What were you saying? If you what? If you did
because
it,
I was going to say like because I feel like I could go and try to do a live show and just eat shit and not have to have it at a certain level. Like I could be like, I'm just going to go to this VFW hall or whatever, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. Like, but I feel like Johnny would have to be like, it has to be like at a legit venue maybe, or it's got to be at something of a certain level. Because anything less kind of would, I don't want to say is diminished returns, but it it just can't be that. It just would look bad.
So yes, yeah, they're with his regular job. It's not like there is a different set of rules, and the caliber and the type of band Avenged Sevenfold is. They definitely, I mean, they have a direction. It's not like a punk band that's just going out saying whatever they want. They have a very the reason why they are who they are is they have a very good formulaic thing. They have a certain image. They don't I mean, they didn't even talk really. They were in the shadows for a very long time until I don't know, right around the time the podcast came out was when they started being like, oh, I guess everyone's talking. We should maybe present ourselves a little bit more. So they were really reserved. They're a very great band as far as almost everybody who works for them is like family as far as been with them forever and things like that. It's a very tight, they're very loyal. And I think that's the key to their success. And honestly, living in Orange County, not LA, I think kind of helped them where they're close enough, but they didn't play into that Hollywood scenes things and all the people, the Johnny Come Lately trying to, whatever. But with that, as far as the podcast comes, it was really hard in the beginning for me doing booking and doing different stuff. Johnny wouldn't do certain things because he didn't want it to look lowbrow or seem too silly because they had to be serious. Even though he's the comic relief or whatever of the band, we had to be very conscious of that, especially when the show was on the Avenged Sevenfold YouTube. And then at one point we just took it off and made it our own thing, which kind of freed things up because it's like, hey, we don't have to worry about if we said something on here that it would alienate the band. So that I think was the first step in the right direction of making its own thing so it could create its own vibe and not alienate someone else's feelings or whatever. But I think there's a lot of opportunities that we haven't done. Like it's just learning. I'm trying to say stuff because I don't want to throw him under the bus.
Right, no.
Because nothing bad, but just, I don't know. It's not my thing to say how he feels, but I do feel like there were some opportunities that we didn't initiate because he didn't want it to seem low, but it's the process of things like any starting things like, hey, you have to reach out to people for X or do this. And there might've been some opportunities that I thought that, hey, let's reach out for this. And he goes, no, they got to reach out to us. And I was like, I get it. You know what I mean? But all that again we're 4 or 5 years in, totally different now. The vibe is now, not that it was wrong back then. I think it's cool that we did a lot of stuff organically. And I think it helped us be not lowbrow to taking those headline grabbing things or whatever. We have stayed to, hey, this is for us. Let's not do things just for the numbers. Let's not do things just for this. It might be a slower gradual of people finding us, and especially people who aren't Avenged fans. But I'm glad we did what we did, and I'm kind of glad that he had that. The show would have definitely been different. I don't know if better or worse. It would have just been, all shows are different. I don't know. I'm kind of dancing around it. I can't think of things specifically, but just like promotion and we have to be conscious of the band. Yeah. Just like me, like I go on there and there's certain things that I will not talk about on the show because I have a day job. And sometimes things are on there like that crack thing. That was back in the past. I can say that now, but if I was like doing drugs or whatever, like I couldn't talk about that because I have a life to go to, or I have a daughter or a son, you know what I mean? So there are lines they have to do kind of close to the vest. We're not all, comedians and things like that don't really have day jobs, so. Well, how do you have problems with that with your job? Like, do you ever like have shit and you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have said that, or I wish I deleted that, or?
The only time I think technically where it might have bit me in the ass is when I worked at my wife's company for a little while, but it was during the pandemic, and the company was making the J&J vaccine at the time. So it was a thing where maybe some of the things of me, I mean, as one does, where you're just kind of like saying like, oh, my job, this sucks, or this is like a thing that is like annoying or whatever. And every job is different. So like maybe some of the things of me bitching about like, yeah, right now, like I've been training to be a qualified inspector, and like the kits that they have us training on are fucking garbage. My wife went through the program, wrote the program initially, and they're having us do shit that doesn't have any fucking like. Get in the weeds real quickly for a second, for an example. So it'd be like, okay, we need you to inspect this, and here's how you inspect this. You're gonna start at the top. You're gonna look around the top of the can for any defects. You're gonna look at the rest of the can for any imperfections or anything, and then you're gonna look at the bottom. You're gonna do that. You should take about 5 to 6 seconds to do all that, and then here's what you're looking for. Now that may be a parameter, but like for certain things, it'd be like this chemical. So like it's called like a lyophil. So it'll be like a compound of like powder in a container. Now the thing will tell you, if you flip it upside down, if it cakes and sticks to the top, it's a defect. If it has like pock marks in it, that's a defect. And I remember like talking to my wife about it. I was like, oh, I had to do this today for part of my training. And I was like, I remember when you guys, because she's one of the first like handful of employees at this place. So it's been a part of my life for 13, 14 years. Since it was like baby business all the way to what it is now. And so I was like, I remember when you guys got this fucking product and all the problems you had identifying what was wrong, what was okay. And then my wife was like, wait, how are they having you test this? And I was like, oh, like this. And she goes, and then she'd get pissed because she's like, Lyo is one of those things where it's dependent upon the customer's specifications of what is passable and what isn't. They're never going to be the same. You can't just go, if it does this, it fails, because that may not be the parameters that works for this company. And I remember her getting into a big thing about it, and then so like I bitch and be like, hey, so I was told this isn't a fail, and they're like, well, no, it is. And I'm like, well, no, it's not, and here's why. And then it would just create all these problems. So sometimes I would kind of talk about those things, or like especially during the pandemic when everyone's like, well, no one knows what's in the fucking vaccines. Actually, motherfucker, yes, I do. You have to know what's in it because it's a formula and it has to like be in these things. Or when people would talk about like, oh, it just went into production. It's like, no, there's what's known as like so basically during the pandemic, drugs and so forth can be expedited. But there's a certain chain of command that you have to do to get it regulated and do everything. But it doesn't have to go through like the 3 trials of being used on people and all the clinical trials and all that, because it's an emergency. You need it. State of emergency, it basically is what it is.
And people focus on it, right? So it's not like the long duration of falling in line. Then, it gets cut to the front.
Sure. And then the other part of that is once it becomes like the COVID vaccine is now, they'll go back through, and then it becomes heavily regulated, goes through all the things you got it like, but because you needed it right then and there. So when a lot of people were kind of bitching about everything during the pandemic, I was like, well, actually, here's kind of what it really looks like from the inside. And maybe I shouldn't have said some of those things, but I also didn't care because like, and I remember someone was like, you have a podcast? And I was like, yeah. I'm like, what do you talk about? You don't talk about this job, do you? And I was like, no. Because I knew damn well that they wouldn't go back through and listen to the hundreds of hours of me talking just to try to find anything that I was saying. But it does become this thing sort of where thankfully no job I've really ever had is that important, that it matters what I say. Like, especially going back to screen printing now, where all I do is I mix the inks and pull the inks for jobs. But it's like, but the other thing is I've always been very adamant. Like if someone wants to get mad that I talked about taking acid recently, like in the last year while my wife was on a trip to go to Vegas during BravoCon, that like I had to come up and we just did. Yeah. Well, she didn't go to that, but they happened to be in Vegas for that same time and went and did a bunch of different stuff around it. But it's like, is me talking about doing acid like on a Saturday while she was gone, like is that something I want to focus on? No. But like today in my conversation with Keith where he's talking about doing ayahuasca and like what it revealed to him and how it helped him write a song on the record and all these other things, because he was like, I'm very much not a drug person, but like this was one of those things where I was like, when am I ever going to get the opportunity? And I think it's going to prove something it's going to do something for me for the positive, so why not? And so in doing that, it's like, do I advocate doing drugs? No, not in the traditional sense of like, fucking do them. I'm always of the thing where I'm inquisitive. There's reasons why I like doing the things that I do. And it's always from the perspective of me getting out of my own way, where maybe I won't focus on something or I'm not addressing an issue. This thing, when I do it, makes me not be in control of that and just makes me face these things head on. Now, throw on the fact that I've gone to therapy and I have a way of, through therapy, of working through shit. I kind of am able to put that lens on this thing. And typically, I think legitimately, if I were to go back through every time I've done like acid or shrooms or DMT or like any of these things, it has revealed something that was a pretty pivotal, life-changing moment for me. Like one time when doing like a DMT, or maybe it was more of like an ecstasy type thing, but regardless, like I learned two things because this drug was a plant additive here in the States that my friend had got. And the thing is you would take this, it's a powder, you would put it into like a liquid, so like water, drink it, and then within about 4 or 5 minutes, you'd be like peaking at a high, at the top of your high. And you could just keep doing that. You could just keep re-upping whenever you wanted. And two things that it taught me was that, one, nothing good can last forever. At some point, you need to deal with real things. And I remember that being a very big thing because, like, my friend wanted to keep going. And I was like, man, we've been doing this for, like, 5 hours. Like, I'm good. Like, I had fun doing it, and if I want to do it again another time, sure, let's kill a Saturday and do this. Like, this was a lot of fun. Listening to music and just talking and all these things, like, the communal aspect of doing this drug, I really enjoyed. But I was like, at some point you just need to stop, man. Like, you can't be on 10 feeling great all the time. Like, that's just not sustainable. And so that taught me that. And the other thing was at the time I was dating somebody, and I had been dating them for like a year, a little over a year, and they never made me feel like I was important. Like, they always found reasons to not hang out with me. And I had just started hanging out with my now wife. And I remember earlier that week, she was like, what are you doing? I was like, sitting at the house. She goes, I'm coming over. I'm bringing booze. We're going to watch Jersey Shore and eat pizza. And it wasn't a date, but like, it was a date. And I remember thinking to myself while I was like in the middle of this trip, I was like, I fucking hate that I'm in this relationship that I have none of the benefits and all of the downsides. Like, I feel not wanted. I don't feel good. I don't get to see the person I really like and all this stuff. And I go, and I don't feel like I'm a priority for this person. And now here's this person that I've, you know, back in the days of MySpace, they used to be the people you may know. And I was like, that girl is really cute and I would like to know who she is. And now I'm getting to know her, and she made me a priority one day, like out of randomly. We've only been hanging out for like a week or two, but she made me a priority. And I feel like I need to end this relationship and see where this one goes, because I'd rather know that one was done than to wonder what would happen if I would have ended that relationship.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I'm like, okay, here we are 14 fucking years later, married for 8. Like, like I'm not saying that trip is what got me here, but it's definitely a step in the right direction to make me realize like what was important to me at that point. And I'm not saying everyone's going to have that epiphany. You're not all going to have that same experience that I did, but what if you do? What if it does reveal something
kids,
to you?
Go do drugs. Bottom line. Responsibly
do drugs.
No, that's cool. No, I like I said, I haven't done drugs, but I've heard all the stories. Johnny has done all those. He talks about it. We've had enough people on the podcast. He
skirts around it a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And also he talks about a lot about mental health. I mean, kind of the stuff that you say is definitely on par with, you know, what he puts out there too, you know. And I think that's great. I mean, the fact that you're finding help too, I mean, I don't know. We all got our fucking issues, but I just don't like the people who go through it and think they all got it under control and are completely self-destructive, but don't reach out for help. And it's just like, I know everything. It's like, dude, it's okay to ask for help. Just like you talk about men. I feel like the last generations and things like that. Luckily nowadays, I feel like mental health is more of a conversation and easier to talk about. Dude, but I look, you see my posts. I like BravoCon. I cry. I do all this stuff, you know. it's okay. We're all human, you know. You don't have to be a stern person just to be a man, you know. So I'm glad to hear that, you know, you're doing the right thing, man.
Trying to.
Yeah.
Just trying to be a better person.
That's all we can do. It's all about being a good person.
You know, I was kind of surprised as you were saying that you were backstage at AEW. I didn't think you were allowed back there since all you do is just film people.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Because I film people?
That was like, yeah, no, talking about like watching people change that was a running gag for a while on.
Oh, the locker room? Oh, yeah, just for the listen. Yeah, I made a joke on one podcast about a back locker room. And so now whenever we have wrestlers on, I say, oh, what's the locker room? Like, yeah. No, but you know what? In hindsight, I probably shouldn't. I snuck videoing of the whole production things that you're not supposed to probably do just for myself to show my kids. Of like, oh my God, this is how they do that. And that was really cool to see the behind the scenes that I had no idea. So, but I didn't actually go in the locker room. So they had security to block me. So next time.
What, kind of in wrapping up, what, you know, because we're about, I guess we're not really halfway. It feels like we're halfway through the year, but I guess we're not. God damn.
Yeah.
I literally
we're a quarter. No, we're a quarter through.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, we're about like almost halfway through the year. And then I just looked and saw it said March, and I was like, no, we're not. We're
not even a third. Not even a quarter. Not even a quarter.
Well, I guess that's it. Okay. I guess I can still ask the question. I just got to put it on the other side. But, you know, with the year still kind of being new, plenty of years still ahead. What are some goals you have for the podcast? What are some goals you have for toy making? And maybe just some personal goals. What do you got that you're looking forward to this year?
Podcasting, I mean, that which we've talked about mainly here. I don't know, goal. I would like to do a live thing. What else about it? You never know. I mean, we've changed our format and how we do things. If you look at the shots and everything, I mean, we're always changing. I can tell you one thing today and then it's going to change. I don't know. My future for the podcast is just hopefully keep my head in it and keep having fun with two of my best friends. As far as the toys, I mean, that is kind of more the thing that I'm starting to put more focus on. Like I said earlier, my goal is to start a toy company. I would love to have a job where I do it because I want to do it, not because I have to do it for paycheck. The problem with that is once you have kids and you have a decent paying job, it's hard to leave that just to risk. And you can't really risk things when you got kids because it's not like my life I'm risking. I'm risking their thing too. So, I mean, if I was younger and I could say, fuck this, I'm going to go invest it all in this. And if I lose it, I'll start over, but you can't do that. But, yeah, anyone, my thing now is just work on collectible runs of action figures for comedians and musicians and things like that. That's my next goal that I'm working on. I think I've unlocked most of it, but I still got a little bit more. So, yeah, that's the goal. And then just
that you didn't make Dewey in a bathtub eating chicken wings.
Yeah. So that's funny too because Dewey. I made one of Brandon. I usually don't do friends because if you do friends, then other friends will be like, "Hey, why don't you do me?" And I don't. I just don't want that. So I try to put lines not to do people I know too directly outside of entertainment. I can be like, "Oh, sorry, get a podcast, get a band. I'll make one of you." But no, most of the things, just so you know about my action figures, I try to only make them of people I'm interested in or have done something to entertain my family. They're all like homages or thank yous almost to the people I make them of. There's not really many that I do because someone reached out to me and asked, and I get hit up all the time for commissions, and I always say no because I do it for me. I don't do it for other people, you know. So if I'm doing it in the art format, not the business format, it's got to be something that will help me escape. And so, And when like I said earlier, when I give to someone and they get joy out of it, that's super awesome to me. It's like, that's what it's about, of being able to repay people for the art they've given me. I get to give them a little shitty art that I have, so it's kind of fun. But I did feel bad. Like, I gave one to Jeremiah Hawkins, I'll say he's not a close friend, but I feel like we're friendly now. And I told him last time I saw him, was like, dude, I got to admit to you, I made your action figure, and Jeremiah's got, he's in my club with the Big Nose Club. And I said, I made your nose and it looks spot on, but I didn't want you to be offended. So I made it smaller, but it didn't look like you. I owe you another figure. And he took it in stride. And then as I was saying, I'm like, what a fucking dick. Like, why would I even bring that up? But then he asked, apparently he played the Joker on a cartoon, and he never had they didn't make an action figure of it. So I think we'll make an action figure of his Joker for him. So, yeah. My kids, my family, that's my future. And finding a job, while I love who I work with and I got a good job, I want to do what I want to do. So the goal is in the next few years to try to make that happen. So, yeah.
Last question for you. How hard is it to keep the secrets that you probably have learned from doing the podcast?
Well, not as hard as you'd think, because honest to God, Johnny and I are you talking about Johnny or just all the secrets that I know of guests and everything, or all the above?
All the above. Because for context, there's plenty of times where either pre or post this thing, or even in DMs or emails or when you're in person, the amount of things that you know about things that no one does, and hey, don't say, or hey, here's this, you didn't get this, like all that kind of shit. It's really interesting, because I think it's why it adds like sort of a credibility for what you do, because if people can tell you these things and it doesn't get out, then people are like, oh, okay, like I know I can fuck with you and tell you things and like everything will be fine, like, and you're not gonna tell people. So I think it just creates like this interesting thing where, at least on my side, because I'm not a Johnny, I don't have a Johnny or things like that, even the amount of shit that technically, like some of it I still have on record, because when I used to do these, it would just go as soon as I started on the old platform I used. So there would be things where it's like, yeah, we're not officially rolling, but we're definitely rolling. And where people are like, yeah, you can't use that. And I'm like, okay. But it's like, I still have that somewhere.
Well,
like just things that people don't obviously want out there. But like, it's just a thing where, to me, it's like the amount of secrets that I've been told through doing this, I think would shock a lot of people. So I just figured you probably have equally good stories of just like, yeah, I really wish I could tell you blank, but I can't.
I mean,
and you don't have to mention anything. I just
no. Obviously, I would. I mean, honestly, like talking about that Fred Durst thing, like I probably shouldn't have said that. Not that, but nothing. But there's nothing real bad there. It's just that's just how
reality
management
of
goes.
Doing business.
Yeah, it's more like talking to you. I hope if anyone is listening by now, which if I haven't made them fall asleep, it's more of I like talking about podcasting, and for the people who want to know. Like I always enjoyed, like Rick Glassman had Harry Mack on. Do you know who Harry Mack is? He's like a rapper on social media, and he just freestyle raps. Okay. He like goes on Omegle. You should check him out if you like hip hop. He's fucking amazing. But he's like this amazing freestylist. And I had so many questions, and then Rick Glassman didn't ask him the typical stuff. He asked him more about the behind the scenes of things, and I just love hearing that. So that's good. But as far as secrets. Johnny's like my best friend. We've been friends for almost 20 years. I met him when Backcountry had just first came out. So they were getting popular, but they weren't what they are now. So I know all of his deep, darkest secrets, but I mean, I have no problem keeping those secrets because I mean, best friends, that's easy to keep those secrets just because I would any other my wife or me or my best friends. So those are easy secrets to keep. There are plenty of stories of weird shit that's happened or stories that someone told about another celebrity or this. I mean, when you said that, I had one that just popped up the other day that happened, or like our lost episode that I can't talk about who it was or why it was. And we only have one, which is surprising. We only have one episode we never released out of all of our episodes.
So 200 plus now.
Yeah, it's funny because we say 200. Thank you. We say 200, but Brandon showed me the other day. I'm like, we call certain episodes, even though we've released more. And I was like, he said, "Oh, I looked up what our real number was the other day. I guess we have 280 is what we've released."
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we weren't really counting Brandon and I.
74. I think.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the bonuses and all those different things, but yeah. I wish I could just give you this. I'm trying to think. I was trying to think of one where like I shouldn't tell, but like who cares?
No, I don't. I just think it's funny to me because like I figured it would just be funny to be like, oh yeah, like the amount of like things that people tell you, and you're just like, why the fuck are you telling me this?
Oh, that's the best part of the podcast is when you get people and they're comfortable with you, and then it's like the cameras stop rolling, so now now they're comfortable. That's always the best to me, and especially the in-persons, because I know you do a lot of the virtual ones, and when you stop, it's still there. But when you're in person and people are like, you hear a lot of the stories at the end of pushing stop on the record, because now you've warmed them up, they've brought up something, and you can ask a follow-up question on it, and they can tell you the real answer, not the PC answer that they're supposed to tell you.
The amount of post interviews I've done are legendary.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, nothing surprising though. A lot of the shit that I heard about people that were bad, I was like, yeah, I figured they were a piece of shit. You know what I mean? It's just more validation than it is, shocking things. But yeah. Well, thanks for having me, man. No, please.
I was going to say last question so we can then end this and then talk shit afterward. Where can everyone find you, or anything you would like to plug?
Drinks with Johnny is the podcast. It's Johnny Christ from Avenged Sevenfold, and we have everything you look up Drinks with Johnny. It's funny, there's a Johnny Drinks podcast I saw the other day that has like 1 million followers or 3 million or something stupid, and it's just, I was like, oh, that's really close to what we have. And I will say real quick on the last thing, I've never liked our title, and I'll go on record of saying that because they know it's been one of the hardest obstacles of booking, especially in the beginning, because everyone assumes, like Kevin Smith, right? That's a whole nother story I won't tell. Right, we're at the end, but that was a really good story. I snuck in.
No, let's end it on that. Let's end on the show name costing us a guest. Sounds like yours was Kevin Smith.
Okay,
and
Kevin
I'll tell
Smith.
you mine when you finish your story.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so I'll try to tell the quick story. So very early when we started. Oh, and then Sam the Hawk Toys. You can follow me. I make action figures, not dolls. You have to see it. Go check it out, because the amount of times that people are like, "Oh, Sam makes these cute dolls," and I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand what it is. They're actually like legit packaged action figures that look like they were sold. They're almost like whatever." Go check it out. It's fun. You'll see pictures of like Fred Armisen and Zach Brown and Ari Shaffir all with my figures. It's really fun. So people like them. Go check it out. So my quick story is, it was the first season. I was on a high from getting Jake the Snake. It was very, very early. And Kevin Smith does this podcast out of Scum and Villainy, which is it's in LA. Yeah, Fat Man on Batman. So Fat Man on Batman is all the nerdy stuff that I can't talk to anybody about, they talk about. It feels like home to me. So they do it at the Star Wars bar, and I knew that they were performing, so I'm a go-getter rather than just emailing. So I'm like, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to get Kevin Smith on this podcast. So I went early. I was down there for something else, but then I hung out in the back where the entrance was, because I saw that there was someone else going there going, "Oh, where's this?" Like, "Oh, we hang out back here." And I went and I hung out with these people who were actually supposed to be there, who had appointments to be there for some reason. And we're talking, And they're like, oh yeah, I'm here for this. What are you here for? I'm like, oh yeah, same thing. I'm here to talk to you. And I acted like I was supposed to be there. So then we're waiting for the owner to show up, and he shows up, and they're like, oh, go around the front. So we go in the front, and there's this line of people that are trying to get in. They're like, no, you can't go in. And I'm like, no, I'm here to see the owner. I'm here. And so they just let me in. And then they close it off. And so I'm just standing around. And then the owner, I can't remember his name. He works with Kevin a lot. He edits stuff. He goes, can I help you? And I was like, oh, I'm actually here to see you. And I told him about what we are and all these things. And he realized he knew who Avenge was, and he did this all. This is a horrible story. I'm really dragging this out for nothing. So long story short, he's like, yeah, this is great. And he said, maybe you guys can do a live podcast here, which I would like to actually do someday. But when I ended up emailing
Star Wars bar, that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's what it is. Now I know what it is. So when I'm talking to him, I said, hey, I've been emailing, but I didn't get a response. So I thought I'd show up and ask. And he goes, yeah, I was actually there when your email came in. And Kevin immediately said, yes, that sounds great. Let's do it. And then his other person was like, but it's a drinking podcast. You don't drink. It says Drinks with Johnny. And so it never happened. And then I followed up a few times and we got close, but I still think we'll get him, but it hasn't. I haven't barked up that tree in a while. But the amount of times that I've gotten emails back, this person doesn't drink, and it's just like, it's not a drinking podcast. Literally 50% or more of our guests don't drink anything on the podcast, whether it's water or alcohol or anything. So yeah. That was a really, I wish I had a better story to end there for you. What is yours? What is yours that?
So funny enough, I thought I was pretty close to getting Kevin Smith at one point for like my, I think 300th episode. And because he was coming actually, I got it. I did it good. So this is when I went and saw, I think that was the Clerk, no, Jay and Silent Bob reboot. It was when he was touring and he was doing that here in town. And so I was like, fuck it, I could probably get him because he's here. And that motherfucker loves to talk.
Oh, he says, apparently he says yes to everything. It's his people that have to rein him in.
I know.
He wants to.
Jordan.
Yeah, that's who I was talking about. Who said you don't drink?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But because I was like, hey, he's promoting this movie, something that I think would be an interesting talking point because I'm more of a music-based thing. And I think he does a really good job of this, is music in his movies. And I know he kind of picks it based on what he's listening to currently, but I don't think it's something that a lot of people talk about, is how steeped in music he is, like of all genres. So I would love to have him on, even if it's for 20, 30 minutes. We're just kind of talking about how music has played a role in helping him create and tell his stories. And then Jordan emailed me back and was like, that's a really great idea. He just doesn't have time. Sorry. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Now, infamously, one of the best reasons I got turned down because of the no drinking thing, Scott Stapp. I had reached out to get Scott Stapp on way, way, way back. I think probably like year 2 or 3. And basically was hit with, your show deals with drinking or has drinking in the title. Scott's newly sober. We just feel like it'd be a conflict of interest. And I remember getting it, and this, and I say this now, and I don't say this to be discouraging or disparaging. I say it to kind of showcase how I've grown and thought about it from a more adult perspective. But for a while, I literally would make jokes that it's like, sorry, we can't have Scott Stapp on the show because he's so insecure in his sobriety that he can't be on a show that doesn't even deal with drinking. It's just a play on words of like, it's almost like the conversation you have when you're at a bar and you just like hit it off with somebody. And I was like, well, I hope Scott Stapp just loves playing VFW halls where there's no bar, there's no inclinations of anything that will affect his sobriety. Can't wait to see that sold out VFW hall tour. And everyone's like, why are you being so shitty about it? I was like, because if you're that insecure in your sobriety that you can't even come on a fucking podcast that has nothing to do with that, but just because it's in the name, really, how insecure are you in your struggles that would be
arms wide open my ass, right?
Sure. And so like now the irony is like I'm kind of dancing around it again because he's got that solo record coming out, and I've been seeing him do some other stuff where, like he was on Theo Von, he's been on some other stuff, and granted they're not drinking stuff, but it's like I feel like And I also have like this in my back pocket that I have episode 500 coming on the horizon, that it's like I could be like, well, if he'd like to come on and we can make it a big deal and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
It's a thing where I don't know if it's going to happen, but I definitely think when and if it does, I'm definitely going to apologize to Scott and be like, I'm sorry that I handled someone trying to handle your sobriety like an asshole. Like, that's on me.
So did you write
Because
to them and say that?
I wrote
Does
them
he have
in
any
an email.
idea? Oh.
He probably doesn't know. It's his people probably looking out for him. But I just remember getting that email being like, he can't have a conversation with me because my show in name alludes to drinking and he's sober and can't handle that. Like,
So you sparked another one. I'll tell you afterward, but I can't say it here because I don't want to. It's not my place to say. But we've had another guest that we originally reached out to about it, and then I was like, yeah, let's have them, and we kept going back and forth. And it was a band that's known, but we weren't full. I mean, you can't like every single band, right? Or listen to every band. So
No.
I just remember that it was a band that we were like, we're not into them, but they got a good following and we're in the same circle. Great. And then they kept leading us on. And I just found out it was more the publicist that wanted this guy on. This guy didn't really want to come on. And then we ran into their manager later and he was like, yeah, that person was really going through alcohol, and even like talking about like a theme of it would have been bad. So I do kind of respect that to a point. But like you said, I mean, like, look, I heard Van Morrison at one point wanted to have concerts where no alcohol was served because he got sick of people getting up to go get a drink. And that wasn't about alcoholism. That was just about interrupting the show. Huh?
That's almost like Morrissey telling
Morrissey do that? Well, Morrissey doesn't show up.
Well, there's that. First and foremost, there's that. Secondly, Morrissey notoriously at Riot Fest probably more than a couple years ago, made a ban to where they couldn't even serve meat during his performance.
Oh, because his whole
like there were vendors that were like, from this time to this time we cannot serve meat because of Morrissey, and I was like, go fuck yourself.
Go shut your mouth.
Please, let me get what I want.
Yeah.
Meat, which is meat. I want meat.
Yes. No, yeah. Man. We could keep going, and I feel bad because I feel like it took all that time to get warmed up and give you something. Have fun editing that. Do you edit these down?
I don't edit anything.
Oh God, no one's getting to this end. If you guys get it to the end, DM me and let me know, because I would love to hear if anyone got to the end of my droning.
Well, here's the other thing that, like, typically, like, because there are times like I've had, like, Shannon Larkin from Godsmack, famously, we went like 3 hours, which is where we're at now. And I remember sending out a thing where I was like, I just hit like 3 hours with Shannon, and it's like, it's all over the place. And I was like, and I put it on like socials. I was like, would you like me to cut it in half or even a third? So it's like, this week you get like an hour, next week you get an hour, next week you get an hour, and it's more digestible. And everyone's like, fuck that, put it all out at once. And I'm like, okay. And it was crazy that the numbers actually were on par or better than normal, because I was like,
oh, good.
No one's gonna give a fuck at the end that we're talking about his turtles, and then he dug a trench to his turtle pond to this other part, so they had more water and land to traverse and all this kind of shit. But like, people were like, I love the turtle part, and I was like, oh fuck, all right, cool. And that was at the very end of the conversation. So like,
yeah,
I don't know. You again, I mean, kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but like, what you think people are going to be into or not into, like, it seems like when I do these longer ones, they do better than the shorter ones, which I find interesting.
Well,
like,
it's
I know
also
they take longer to get through.
You do mainly podcast, so it's so funny you say that, because we're bigger. We have more of a YouTube following than the audio. I mean, the audio is fine.
I think that's more what my shit is turning into, is more YouTube at this point.
But it's all about clips. So the other thing that we got to do is, I keep saying, like, dude, we need to hire someone, because we don't have time. We need to do the little 3-minute clips, because today, I mean, with podcasts, it's all long form. People come to listen. But anything on YouTube, it's like, our actual episodes, long form, we'll do okay. And then we'll have a clip that just does a lot better, because people just take things and snip it on YouTube, So it's a different animal. And I refuse to go on TikTok, because I don't need another addiction.
Same. Well, thank you for taking the time. And now,
hey man, it's good to know you after all these. I would say we've been friends for, even though we've never talked in person. But
yeah,
yeah, that's nice to
No,
get some time
I
with you.
also want to shout out your guys shouting me out. I always say us, and it's just me. Shouting me out during your Joanna Angel episode. I thought that was kind of funny.
Oh, that's right. Well, Johnny used your episode to study up for his. Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing
Yeah,
about
'cause at that
podcasts
point,
too.
I don't
Where
think she
you're
had
talking
done
about people's,
anything.
huh?
I said,
She
I
hadn't
think at
done
that
anything?
point, I think I was one of the first 2 or 3, and the first to put something out. So I don't think there was much out at that point of that she had done.
And you gave her the fever. Now she's got her own podcast. So
I know. I need to get Aaron, her husband, and I have been talking about doing another episode because I've had them on. It's always funny because like I've dipped into the porn world a little bit. Like I've had both Aaron and Joanna on, to use Johnny's phrase, easy enough for me to say.
yeah, I love
then-
that you know that.
And then Rachel Midori, who I was really interested in from her conversations on Pure Pleasure. And then I've had Stormy Daniels, famously, on the show. So
Yeah, she's in the metal. Yeah, I
she's
saw that.
actually
I
been
think she
to,
actually.
I think to an Avenged show.
I say I think she followed
Avenged.
Avenged, but I didn't reach out. I should have. Right? I guess I still could. Is she dead? No, she's. Still
I don't know.
alive, right?
Yeah, she's very much.
That's a
still alive.
horrible thing to say, but
I don't know if her number is still the same. I had someone grab my phone and go through it randomly before it like shut down, and then texted Stormy, and I haven't heard back from her since. But I remember this person went through my phone, texted Stormy, and then tried telling on me to my wife. Like she didn't know. She was like, "By the way, your husband's texting someone named Stormy Daniels," and my wife just looks at her at the bar and she was like, "Yeah, that's Stormy Daniels." The girl goes, "Are you shitting me?" And she was like, "How the fuck do you have Stormy Daniels' phone number?" And I was like, "I had her on my podcast." And she was like, "Really?" And then she's like, "Do you think you could, like, do you think I could fuck her?" Another woman asking me this. I was like, "No, that's not how this works." But it was very.
and the amount of
she was
numbers
like,
that I like. Isn't it cool though? You feel cool because you have these people's numbers. You're like, I'm never going to use this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have so many people's numbers. I'm like, yeah, it'd be weird if I did text this person. I mean, if I needed them, but
I have the opposite thing. A while, again, speaking to kind of being on a trip, I was on a mushroom trip and walking my dog because I live across the street from an elementary school. So like half the time there's no one there, so I'll just walk her over there. And I remember, again, my wife was out of town camping, which I don't like doing. And so I remember I was like, oh, I want to hang out with somebody. And then I remember like looking through my phone book and
so you went to a school.
numbers,
Smart. Just kidding.
yeah. And then most of the people I was, all my friends were with my wife camping. And then when I went to like look through my phone book to be like, oh, who can I hang out with? Most of my phone book is touring people. And like part of me was really sad. I was like, it's really fucking sad. I don't really have a whole lot of people that live here that I have phone numbers with that I can hang out with. But then it also made, again, speaking to like random epiphanies, but I had the epiphany that I was like, I do low-key like that I have so many touring friends because, and I try to maintain the relationship as best as you can through texting and different social media apps and so forth. But I came to this realization that I was like, I think those relationships are so secure in what they are because we understand that we're only going to see each other like maybe one time a year for 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
But we pack as much, we really value that 4 to 5 hours with each other because we know it's all we got. And it really made me think about how fucked up it is that why is it that this world that I love, touring and music business, the music industry and so forth, why is it that those friendships I feel are more valuable because we understand that versus my everyday relationships where I don't feel like people understand that we need space but when we come together, like it's we are the focal point at that point. But when you get away from that, it's like you got your life, I got mine, and if I don't talk to you for 3-4 months or whatever, it's not because I don't care, it's just life got in the way. Like, why is it that this industry kind of supports that idea and the rest of your life does not?
That's a good point. Well, I mean, I kind of do that because I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm like literally,
you,
I just
you leave my
want
text unread. I get it.
Yeah, no, I respond to all your texts. Text is one thing, but going out and doing things, I'm weird. I don't know. I think Johnny and I hang out. I'll go out with him because we have like interest stuff. So we'll go to. He and I are kind of like hey, you want to go to the show? You want to do that? But other than that, I don't really go out with very many people. It's all about my family. That takes up most of my time. So, but speaking of which, I have taken way too much of your time, and I got to go put these kids to bed. Figuratively, they put
kids to bed at what is it?
8:30. I hear the showers are going. And,
I see all this.
Oh yeah, it's super late.
Sunlight in your room. Yeah, this is about
no. It's just I got a ring over here shining on me. So, but hey, man, thank you for inviting me. I got to come back on and think of some actually interesting things to say to you. I feel like my stories were half interesting, but I'll get there.
You know what? Everyone has an interest.
This is why I like to be second in command, not the main guy.
This is why it's hard for me to be a guest on other people's shows because, there's a couple of people I bet on their show, and I'm always like, this is weird not being in control and not being the one that's doing everything and just kind of having to be along for the ride where you're like, fuck, man, where are we going?
Well, dude, I was on another podcast about toys and I really liked it. Toys on Tap. I really liked that. But he clearly, and I feel like you did too, there's agendas to shows, but I'm just so all over the place where I just talk and I constantly have to be reined in. It's like, no, we're going on this path, Sam. I was like, okay, sorry. Because I'm like, oh, let's talk about blah, blah, blah. So
I think for me, it was just more of a focus on making it about you, whereas I feel like some other people might make it more about so what's it like working with Johnny? What's it like doing a podcast where you're to me, it's that's not, I don't know, it's not interesting.
Well, that's why I always talk about that because I feel like anybody wants to talk about. Yeah. I gladly would talk next time we talk. I'll talk about my toys more.
So that was my conversation with Sam. I want to thank him once again for ignoring his family for 3 hours while I was ignoring my wife while she was watching Vanderpump Rules. A lot of interesting stuff in there. Honestly, speaking of the Vanderpump Rules connection and Bravo, for those who may or may not know what Bravo is, that either means that you are not a woman of a certain age. Actually, I think the Bravo demographic is pretty wide-reaching, probably from 15 to 60-something, if I had to guess. Or you're not married, and your wife doesn't watch these things. But even hearing Sam kind of talk about just sort of how easy it was, but then also the repercussions of them getting the person from the Real Housewives of Orange County on and apparently not going through Andy and or the Bravo team was pretty interesting. It's kind of funny that even in doing this, and you would think someone, again, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning of, you look at someone of the level of Drinks with Johnny, over on the Sound Talent Media Network, and basically you would think that they wouldn't have as many problems getting guests necessarily as, maybe someone like myself who doesn't have a bigger name attached to me, doesn't have a network behind me and so forth. And to hear that they still go through just the same troubles and trials and tribulations and all that kind of stuff that I do over here was kind of interesting, and just kind of even seeing that they sometimes get in trouble for some of the things said and done on the show. But I think a bigger thing that I hope you all take away from this is just the friendships and camaraderie within the scene and the space of podcasting in and of itself. I mean, when I started this, there was a small smattering of people that were kind of like-minded, kind of did similar-esque shows, and we kind of all started around the same time and kind of helped each other as much as we could. We had each other on each other's shows, and it was a lot of fun for a little bit. And then, some people fell by the wayside. They don't do the show anymore. Life happened. But it is a thing where a show like this, an episode like this, I think really showcases just the camaraderie there is in the podcasting scene all around us. And, someone might be like, well, Drinks with Johnny's my favorite show, but I've never heard of this one, or I've never heard of Drinks with Johnny, which to me I would find very weird, considering we are kind of lumped in together quite a bit as far as the style of show. But it is a thing where I really appreciate the help. And as you kind of heard Sam and I talking a couple of times in the chat, we go back and forth with advice and ask questions to one another when we're kind of hitting a rough spot. And it's just really good to have people like that. And I think like just having people like that in your life in general is really nice, to be able to have people that can help you grow and help you succeed in the different things in your life. Sam has been a great person since I got to know him through Dewey, through me trying to reach out to get Johnny on the podcast. If you haven't heard that episode, go back. That was a fun chat with Johnny a couple years ago. And I want to thank Sam also for hooking it up for the wife and I to go out on a school night to go see the Avenged tour when it came through here in town. I think we were the third date of the tour. And to cross promote again, if you want to go hear Johnny with Sullivan King sort of talking shit on Grand Rapids, which is where I live, you can go check out that conversation with Sullivan King on the Drinks with Johnny podcast and hear Johnny sort of more or less treat Grand Rapids, Michigan like it's the middle of nowhere, USA. So that was kind of funny and amusing, but it's all love. And speaking of love, again, this episode is really long, so I'm trying my best to just hurry up and kind of wrap it up because I don't want to keep you too much longer. But Sam has been doing really great things. I know we didn't necessarily talk a ton at length about the toys that he makes, the action figures. If you haven't seen him, you can follow him. I know I'm kind of jumping the gun on how I usually do this, but if you go to Sam the Hawk Toys on Instagram, you can see all the... I always want to call them in-action figures, but the action figures that he has made for various guests that have been on the show and just people that he finds interesting on his own. And just to see the reaction of people who are very stoked to get these action figures of themselves and just being thought of, I think showcases how great Sam is, how he likes to make people feel welcomed and wanted and appreciated. And just been a great person to get to know over the last couple of years of knowing him. And so this was really fun getting to do. And it's someone that you may not know anything about. And that's, I always love championing the people that no one knows, whether it be techs or tour managers or a ton of behind-the-scenes people in the industry. This is no different. Sam, I think, does a lot for the show. And only in the last couple of seasons or couple of years, I'll say, of the show, him and Brando kind of taking more of a front and center role on the show at Drinks with Johnny. And honestly, I think some of my favorite episodes are the ones that don't have guests, and it's the three of them just bullshitting, because watching three friends that know each other just bust balls really fucking makes me happy and makes me laugh. So I hope they do more of it. I hope they start doing some live podcasting, and hopefully maybe the trio of them can make it out somewhere close to this area and do one, because that would be fun for me to watch people do one. If you've never seen a live podcast too, my wife makes me feel really stupid for enjoying those, but something about podcasting and a live format especially that I think is really interesting, and it's fun. And especially when you kind of know the people, or you feel like you know the people if you listen to the show enough. So enough blabbing. Let's start wrapping up the episode. If you would like to keep up with Drinks with Johnny, you can find him on Facebook at Drinks with Johnny, Instagram at Drinks with Johnny, and Twitter at DrinksWJohnny, or just go to drinkswithjohnny.com. That has all the access to the Discord, the shop, literally everything. You can sign up for their, I think it's a Patreon. Maybe I'm mistaking what it's called, but I believe it's their Patreon where you get access to other stuff. I think it's the Filthy Animals crew or something to that effect. But go check them out. And then, like I said, head on over on Instagram, Sam the Hawk Toys. Give him a follow. He's on Facebook, but that's more of a private, friends thing. So I don't know how he feels about that. But if you know how to use Facebook, I'm sure you can find him. And for the podcast, you can find us simply enough, Bruce Speak Pod, on all your major social media platforms. Email me at brutallyspeaking@gmail.com. Rate, review, subscribe, whatever you can do on said platform. Do it. It is greatly appreciated. And I want to thank, speaking of appreciation, Rockabilia for their continued support of the show, and really want to thank them. As of what I'm recording this, with the payout of what I'm getting soon, I'm going to spend it on a new dryer because mine is shit. And it's, when I say that the support of Rockabilia has really helped me, I don't just mean and I do mean on a friendship level, but I also mean that the money that they give to support the show has gone to really help me in my real personal life. It has gotten me new tires for my car when I got into it one day and there was a fucking flat tire and I had to get 4 new tires. It's, as I just said, it's going to help me buy a new dryer. It helped me get new doors recently for the house. It has helped me when I really needed some extra money to help offset some of the things life threw at me that I was not financially able to cover in the moment. So when I say that Frankie and Rockabilly and all them are great people and really help the show, help me, I really do mean it. And I know that maybe that's a little bit TMI, but I'm just spreading the positivity and the love. And speaking of which, I also want to say thanks to everyone from last week who shared and commented on the Keith Wallen episode. Did really great. Great seeing a lot of people comment. And just honestly, a lot of people supporting Keith. The dude's a great dude. I got a lot of compliments and a lot of comments that were just like, I love Keith. He's so nice. So it was really great to just see so many people commenting about that episode. So thank you. And if you returned and you're listening to this one, I'm sorry this one was so much longer, but that's sort of just how this show is. I try not to tether the show to any specific thing, time limit, restraints, anything like that, unless I have to. So if you made it all the way through, like Sam said, DM him and let him know that you listened to the whole thing. But thank you so much for taking the time with us this week, and I will see you all next week. And I'm going to maybe mispronounce this gentleman's name. I looked it up a few different times. There was different ways everyone said it. So I'm going to say it how I think it's said. But we have Lucky from Alpha Wolf. That was a really fun chat. Maybe by next week when I have to do the intro, outro, I'll know how to say his name officially. But that was a fun one. Looking forward to getting that one to you. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you all next time.